one of our regular friends, or has it been here before? Everybody is regular. Excellent. Welcome to our 75th anniversary this year. We continue to roll on. Mark's going to miss his own dedication here again tonight. I always try to give him credit when he's here, because when I took over the store in 2007 after working here for about 16 years, my first signing here was for a book called Early Hollywood, and I did that with Mark Wanamaker and Robert Noodleman. And I hung a bunch of sheets off the balcony, and that's how Mark did his show, and I said that was the best presentation I had. And so Mark and Robert went to a theater convention show one day and came back and said, come out to the car, you got to help me out. And I went outside, and they bought me this 7-foot screen, and we've shown every show on it ever since, here for 6 years. So I'm always very thankful to Mark and to Robert for doing that and for contributing here to what we try to keep going here, is, you know, what we think is the best of Hollywood. And most of the best of Hollywood, but not all, is the older stuff. So, in our opinion, so that's what we keep trying to do. With a lot of shows coming up right here, so if you're on the Facebook page or you look on the website on LarryEvans.com, you'll see all the listings. We have another great show Saturday afternoon, special 4:30 time with Mark Vieira. World premiere for the new George Harrell Hollywood portrait book. There's brand new Harrells in there nobody's ever seen before. New and old, fantastic stuff. We got a night with Live Talks Los Angeles. Mitch Albom going to get interviewed by Bradley Whitford for his new book. We have 2 weeks from tonight, for all you rock and roll people, I have a special Bruce Springsteen program planned with Deborah Rothenberg, who's a photographer that shot Bruce for 30 years and has put together a collection of all her stuff. That and lots more coming up. So thank you all for coming tonight. We couldn't do it without you. We appreciate you coming. And I will now introduce 2 of our 3 authors that are here right now. We'll wait for the third one to come in, Mr. Michael Cristaldi to my right, making the trip from the East Coast to join us tonight. And Mr. E.J. Stevens, making the trip from Santa Clarita Valley over the hill, right?
Traffic was hell. It was awful.
So thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn it over to our authors tonight, and enjoy the show.
My name is Michael Cristaldi, and once again I want to thank everybody for coming in tonight and hearing about our Paramount book. It was something that was very close to me. When I first came out to Los Angeles about 20 years ago, Paramount was the first studio I saw, and I fell in love with it. And as a kid, all my favorite shows and movies were Paramount movies. When I'd see that mountain logo come up at the end, and here I was finally seeing it. And I want to thank Jeff also for having us here. And you know, as you guys know, these shops are dwindling, you know, and Jeff's still here and he's hanging on, but we hope that you guys will support, you know, the shop and support the books and tell your friends to shop here and stuff like that, so we can keep having events like this. And you know, there's not too many other places to go for all this great stuff, the movie posters, stills, lobby cards, books, and things like that. And I don't know if you know, but Jeff's a very generous guy, a very generous guy, and we thank him for allowing us to be here and keeping the shop open. And just earlier tonight, him and I went to get something to eat before the event, and we're walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and he's so generous. This homeless guy came walking past us, and the guy's shoe was flapping up and down, and Jeff said, wait a minute, I gotta help this guy out. And he stopped and he pulls a roll of $100 bills out of his pocket, this thick, with a rubber band around it. And he walked up to the guy and he says, put this rubber band around your shoe. So, and I said, you know, that's generosity. So, I also want to thank a friend of mine's here tonight, Murray Langston. You may know him as the Unknown Comic from years from the Gong Show. Are you clapping for yourself?
I love Night Patrol, man.
So,
Awesome.
He's out here to support us. He just wrote his autobiography, which is a very interesting book. It's coming out through Bear Manor in about a month. And it's loaded with fascinating stories about his interactions with Frank Sinatra, Sonny and Cher, Tuesday Weld, and I can just go on and on and on about it. But we're hoping that he'll be having an event here soon, so that'll be something that you guys could look for and hopefully attend also. And early Paramount Studios came about a year and a half ago. EJ and I were having breakfast over at Warner Brothers, and he had just done an early Warner Brothers Studios book with Mark, and I said to him, why not do a book about Paramount? And he said, would you want to do that? He said, because I'm really busy, he said, and I'm staying up all night and working, and he works over at Warner Brothers, and he's a tour guide there. And I said, yeah. So he said, well, I'll email Arcadia. And as soon as they got the email from him, they said, do it, that quick. And took us about a year of research and writing. Mark had all the pictures. As we know, he has a great collection through his Bison Archives company, and he supplied those. And about a year and a half later, we were holding the book in our hands. And just to let you know, the book's doing fantastic. We sold out of the first printing in 3 weeks. In 3 months, we sold over 2,000 copies of the book. It's in the third printing now. Paramount is thrilled with. I was so worried. I was going over to Paramount, taking the tour and stuff over there, and I'm like, I can't tell these people I'm doing a book. They're going to ban me from the lot. So I didn't tell them until like after we had the contract and the book was almost done, and they loved it. Brad Gray was going to buy 3,000 copies just to give to every employee. That's how much they thought of it. So we'll be doing a second version of the book. This book goes to 1939. And we'll be doing a second version to go up to like 1970 or so. And we have a lot of photos in the PowerPoint presentation. EJ and Mark are going to talk about that. And I want to introduce EJ Stevens now. He's a Warner Brothers tour guide, huge movie lover, just as I am and everybody else here. He's a historian on all things movie and TV related. He does his own tours as well as working for Warner Brothers being a tour guide. He doesn't have enough there. Him and his wife, Kim Stevens, they have their own tour guide company, and they do all kinds of fun places that you don't get to see otherwise. They live up in the Santa Clarita Valley, and he has a book coming out on the Santa Clarita, famous people from the Santa Clarita Valley, and he had one published also about Santa Clarita Valley. He also hosts, if you guys are on the computer, go to scinthemovies.com, SCV inthemovies.com, and he hosts a show called SCV in the Movies. And he hosts also the Warner Brothers VIP Tour Speaker Series, and it's a new thing that they're doing over at Warner Brothers where they interview people from the family and people Warner Brothers related. And if you guys are interested in Warner Brothers besides Paramount, you could check that out, and he hosts that show. So here's EJ Stevens, and let's enjoy Paramount. Do you guys have any questions? Just raise your hands, shout them out, and
What's the distance of the sun to the moon?
No, is that at perihelion or aperhelion?
I could think of a response to that, but they're all dirty, and there are ladies in the room, so I won't respond to that.
Yes, sir.
Michael and EJ, what in the book, and I bought my copy from Mark at the USC Archivist Fair 3 weeks ago on USC.
Am I getting a cut from that?
But I enjoyed it immensely, and congratulations on
thank
it.
you.
But your comment about being nervous about Paramount, what in the book do you think would make Brad Gray or any executive at Paramount nervous about its
There was
content?
nothing in it, but from their standpoint, knowing that an author was coming around, taking the tour, 2-3 times a week to look at the lot, they may have thought, hey, we don't know what this guy's going to write, but there's nothing in the book that's controversial, and they realized that. Before they would set us up for a book signing, I had to send them advance copies of the book just to make sure. I mean, obviously, they're not going to have us three in there doing a book signing if we're slamming the studio. You know what I mean? How would that look? So, so from their standpoint, they just like if I wrote a book about Larry Edmonds, you know what I mean? He's going to say, come in, I need to see the book. I have you here talking about me, and then, you're saying all bad things. So there was nothing in the book that they would have found objective, Unless you found something, some cryptic message, you know, like when you played the Beatles albums backwards and it said Paul is dead. So, I don't know, we should do that. Read the book backwards and see if...
You know, I'll add one thing to that. I work at Warner Brothers, and I had one of the corporate executives there. You never know what they're going to take exception to, right? He got upset about us saying on one of the tours that Errol Flynn liked to drink. So you never know what's going to tick off the corporations,
I
right?
didn't know that.
Yeah, and you're shocked, right?
Yeah.
You can have a seat, whatever you want to do. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you again. I am not Mark Wanamaker. He's on his way here.
Mark Wanamaker, like
yeah.
Marilyn Monroe, is late.
Yeah, that's right. So he will be on his way. He got the nights a little bit confused, but he's on his way right now. He's just down the street. So he'll come in and fill in any blanks that we have as we go along. I would also like to thank Larry Edmonds and Jeff and everyone here, because I'll tell you my own personal story. My first book was early Warner Brothers Studios a couple of years ago with Mark. This is where I did my first book signing, and so this is a special place. And this is also where I met this guy, Michael Cristaldi. I was down here with my wife, and we were having dinner around the corner here, and we stopped in to just say hi, and we met this clown, and the next thing I know, we're writing a book together, so that's the way it works. But thank you all. I know there's a lot of great places you can be tonight. Thank you for coming out. Let's get going since we're burning some night here. This is the cover, of course, for early Paramount Studios. Now, I'm sure you find this rather familiar, all you film buffs. By the way, I live in LA, so I can be at places like this, okay? I'm from Indiana. You don't get this out in corn country, Indiana, okay? So I really am so very thankful we still have places like Larry Edmonds here, so this is just a great thing. But as you look at this, you folks are fans, you recognize this scene. This is one of those life imitating art, imitating life type of moments where you have Gloria Swanson coming on into the famous Bronson Gates, which are still there, a little bit modified outside. But what an iconic image, an iconic scene. And by the way, I love that shirt. That's amazing. Yeah. All right, so let's start off. This is the Paramount Pictures logo, the Majestic Mountain. This has been around since Paramount was founded. Now, we'll get to a little bit more of the history of this. Now, we already established I work for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, when you give the history of Warner Brothers, it's pretty straightforward. You got 4 guys named Warner, okay? They founded a company. You can't really do that with Paramount. Paramount's history is a lot more convoluted. There's a lot of amalgamation and mergers and acquisitions, that kind of thing. I guess if you had to say who is, Mr. Paramount or father of Paramount, it'd probably undoubtedly be this guy, Adolf Zukor. This guy, a pretty amazing story. He was born about 1883 in Hungary, and by the time he was 8 years old, he was already an orphan. Okay. By the time he was 15, he decided to get out of Hungary. He jumped a boat to New York, $40 sewn into his coat, lands at New York as a kid. He gets a job, $2 a week at an upholstery shop. And he eventually goes and becomes an apprentice for a furrier, doubles his salary to $4 a week. Okay, he was a very driven young man. By the time he was 18, I think we got a picture of it here. This is him as an 18-year-old. He had his own furrier company in Chicago, 25 employees. Within a couple of years, he was back in New York, where he became good friends with another guy named Marcus Lowe, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. He eventually founded his own huge media empire, as we know. Sometime around 1902, somewhere in there, he stepped into a penny arcade. He said, hey, a lot of money to be made in this new venture. So he got with some investors. They eventually bought a bunch of arcades, a string of them. Eventually they went into Nickelodeons, and this is where he started showing flickers. Public taste changed very quickly, as we know, in entertainment. They quit showing movies in a lot of Nickelodeons, but Zukor was really sold on the idea of film. And the idea at the time was that Americans wouldn't sit still for a movie that was more than just a few minutes long, a one-reeler, maybe a two-reeler. He said, you know what, I think we're underestimating our audience. let's give them something a little more meaty, a little longer. He invested in a movie called Passion Play. It was 44 minutes long. Ooh, right? But this was revolutionary. He released it. He was actually very, very scared of the release of it. So I think it was in Newark that they actually released the film. It did very, very well, and so he said, you know what, I'm going to bet the store on this. This is the movie Queen Elizabeth, 1912, starring Sarah Barnhart. I believe he paid something in the neighborhood of $40,000 to buy the American rights. It was a blockbuster. Here's a scene from it. Now, Sarah Barnhart, I love this. Even from this scene, you can tell there's a lot of melodramatic acting. You can watch a little clip of this in YouTube, and you can, it's great. It's great stuff. At the time, she was considered the most famous actress the world had ever seen. Okay, and I think that's a good lesson for performers of any age. To know that you can be the most famous person the world has ever seen. Pretty soon, you're unknown, right? Ah, look who's here. Hi, Mark Wanamaker. How you doing?
Mark Wanamaker.
All right. Good to see you, buddy. Hey.
We're supposed to do a program at Book Soup in December, and so I got them confused. So I was over there, and then Rhino Records guy, who I happen to know, he's doing his book on Rhino Records there.
Oh, that's cool.
So a lot of people there I knew, and I thought it was for me. And I go up to him, I say, "What are you doing here?" He says, "It's my book tonight." Oh, I'm telling you. All right. Anyway,
You were just extremely early.
Yes. So where has he gone? He's just beginning.
We're starting. Yeah, we're at Queen Elizabeth.
We're at Queen Elizabeth.
All right, go on.
Yeah.
You want to sit down back
Yeah,
there?
come to the
No,
seat.
it's all right. I'm too wired now. The traffic is horrible on the strip.
Did you run down?
I ran. Yeah. All right. Anyway, continue.
Well, Zucker was all in on films. He was so in fact, that he sold his arcade Nickelodeon business, and I'm sorry, the Furrier business, and got into this full time. He opened his own studio. This is now called Chelsea Studios. It's in Manhattan. This was on West 26th Street in Manhattan.
Yeah, when I was there in the 70s, it was a CBS, one of the CBS television studios. And it said CBS everywhere, and I thought, my gosh, isn't that interesting? That the old original studio, Famous Players, became a TV studio.
It's still in operation today. It's Chelsea Studio.
So it's a TV studio.
Yeah, it's still TV studio.
Very interesting.
Yeah, they did things like the Honeymooners there, things like that back in the day. He founded the company Famous Players Film Company. Now, his idea was, one of the things that Zucker really did was he saw the value of stars, and he thought that he could take famous players from theater, from famous plays, put them on screen, and that's what a lot of his early films were. They were basically just theater presentations put on screen, and that's where he got the name there. Now, he eventually started producing. I told you he knew the value of stars, and he started producing his own films. And this is Mistress Nell, which stars somebody named Mary Pickford up there.
Never heard of her.
Never heard of her, right. This is pre-America's Sweetheart days. Okay, this would be about 1915. And you can see here this was produced there in New York. This is before they all came west. Now, they did come west very soon after this, though, and this is a great photo that I don't think has ever been published before. This came out of Mark's archives.
I like what he did with it. He framed it.
Yeah.
But basically, Adolf Zucker sent Mary Pickford out here first to do a bunch of films in different places here. And because Mary had been here already with the Biograph Company. Remember, she did Ramona here, for example, 1910.
1910, yeah.
So they sent them around to different rental studios. So one of the rental studios was the Bradbury Mansion on Bunker Hill. That was a rental studio, believe it or not. And also, she was at another little studio at Van Ness and Santa Monica Boulevard, Pacific. It was called the Pacific Laboratories and Studios, where Hal Roach later went to, right after Mary was there with Famous Players, for Roland Pictures with Harold Lloyd. And then the deal, it's interesting, there was a company called Fiction Players. And Fiction Players was eventually purchased by Famous Players. And they had a little studio at Bronson and Melrose, in the middle of fields and farmlands, with haycocks. A haycock is when you get the hay and you make a stack out of it. So that's what was all there. So the film that he chose to go there with was The Girl from Yesterday, which is an aviation film. And it was easy to land the airplane right next to the studio. And that's what they did. So this is a very rare shot on the open stage of the fiction/famous player studio, showing, why don't you point with your pointer? Mary Pickford is sitting there, okay? Now over on the left, there are two dancing men. The one on the left is Alan Dwan, the director who directed the film, and her brother, Jack Pickford, with him. So this open stage is an enclosed stage. I think it's stage 4 at Raleigh Studios today.
Right by his office.
My home.
Yeah. So it all comes full circle tonight. All right, so we talked about Lasky. Now, I'm sorry about Zucker. This is Jesse L. Lasky. Now, this would be a second of the triumvirate that actually put this company together. Jesse Lasky, he was born about 7 years after Zucker. He was born on the West Coast. By the time he was about 18, his father also passed away. He wasn't an orphan like Zucker, but he didn't have a father after 18. He was quite a good cornet player. We'll get to that in a moment. But what he decided to do, he had a sister and his mother to support as an 18-year-old. He talked his mom into letting him go to the gold rush up in Alaska. And he went up there, came back a few months later, broke. But he, along the way, had earned his passage back home playing the cornet, which he'd learned as a kid. He came back and he discovered that his sister Blanche, in the time that he was gone, had become something of a good cornetist herself. So they went out on the road in vaudeville and they went traveling around. They had their own act that they did the circuit on. But he actually became more successful booking other acts. He was so successful that he was able to found his own booking agency in Chicago. Now, he also got into producing. This is a play that he did called The Trained Nurses, 1912. Sometime around this time, his sister Blanche was tired of being on the vaudeville circuit. She wanted to get married. Their mother said, "Hey, I know this great guy that you should marry. He works in a glove factory." Or I guess he was the salesman for a glove factory.
How boring.
Yeah. His name was Samuel Goldfish. Okay, not Goldwyn.
Isn't that boring?
Yeah, that's about as boring. That's the definition of boring. But Samuel Goldfish. And they got married. Unfortunately, it was a very unhappy one, but they were married for a while. So anyway, Jesse L. Lasky now has Samuel Goldfish for a brother-in-law. Goldfish wanted to get into film. And so what happened was Lasky had failed with his latest venture, which was a what do you call it, a nightclub type of thing.
Yeah, Folly Brazier, it
Yeah.
was called. He sunk a lot of money into it. It was real, like a Parisian type of French show, and it did very well in France, but not with him. He thought it would go well in New York, and it was just too elaborate, and they weren't making money there.
So he, after he failed from this, he got an idea to make a movie based around Native Americans. He needed a playwright, so he went to a woman that he knew who represented playwrights, and she also had a couple sons, one of them being this guy, Cecil B. DeMille. Okay. Now, Lasky wasn't too excited about working with DeMille. He wanted to work with DeMille's brother, William, who was actually more accomplished at this time. But he kind of got pawned off on Cecil. Oh, well, we'll do something. They worked out together. They put together a very successful play. DeMille had a lot of wanderlust. He by this time he was already married. He was pretty much living paycheck to paycheck from his playwright duties. He decided that he was going to drop out of the whole show business scene and go to Mexico and be a war reporter. Okay. Lasky, in a fit of desperation because he doesn't want to lose his best friend to adventure like that he wasn't interested in, he said, hey, if you want adventure, let's get into movies like my brother-in-law Samuel here is trying to get us to do. And before he could take it back, DeMille said, let's do it. So what they did was they turned over an envelope, they wrote down the Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company idea that they came up with. And I love this picture. DeMille was going to be head of production, Lasky was going to be president, Goldfish was going to be kind of the business manager. I love this because this is Cecil B. DeMille from the 1910s. This is kind of a little bit out of order, but notice how he's sitting there. This is Cecil B. DeMille 40 years later. Exactly the same pose. I just love that juxtaposition. But
well, we love this picture because that's the one and only poster of the Squaw Man, and nobody's ever seen one yet, right, Mike?
Right.
That I didn't know about. Just learned something.
That's right, and we're looking for it. So anybody has a Squaw Man poster in their pocket, let me know. I'd love to have it at the barn.
So let's go on past here. So let's talk about the Squaw Man. By the way, Dustin Farnham. I'm sorry, let's go back there, push the wrong button. Dustin Farnham, who, you see the name, I just discovered his plaque on the Walk of Fame, right?
Oh yeah,
the other side of the street. That's so great.
Stars on Dustin Farnham and William Farnham, his brother, at Fox Studio. But before you go on about the Squaw Man, real quick about feature films. Adolf Zukor brought, as you probably, did you mention?
Queen Elizabeth and
Did you mention
Passion
that? Yeah, the Queen Elizabeth idea of bringing a feature film to the United States for more than 5 reels. It's quite interesting how you could charge like $1 to get in. It's like 10 times the amount for a film. Everyone said, you're crazy. Who's going to pay $1 to see a film? Well, 5 reels, you know, with Sarah Bernhardt, she was a legend. So people did it. And other people like Jesse Lasky and the rest thought feature film, but it's an investment, it's a risk. So this was a big risk they were taking. Should we do these features?
Well, they didn't decide. They actually left the restaurant. They bumped into this guy, Dustin Farnham, and they said, hey, we just formed a movie company. Would you like to do something with us? And just as Mark said, he was doing this play on Broadway.
You know, there's another thing. You have to remember that DeMille's mother was a very big playwright, what do you call it, agent. They had all these scripts coming, all these shows that they were doing. Jesse was producing. Everybody knew each other on the stage, so they knew Farnham. So it's not like you just bump into him. They know him and they bump into him and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we have something." You see what I mean? And Dustin Farnham knows who they are, so he's going to take a risk on this. Of course, if he makes money. But in other words, there's nothing totally by accident here. Everybody knows each other. Everybody is taking a risk together.
Farnham turned down the percentage for the money.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Farnham turned down the percentage at first.
Yeah.
But anyway, go on.
This okay. So the Squaw Man. So he was in this play on Broadway, and he said to Lasky and DeMille, "Hey, you know what? If you buy the rights to the Squaw Man, let's make that a movie. I'll be in your picture." They said okay. They went out and they did it. They secured the rights. Now, as I was telling you, DeMille had Wanderlust, and I believe there was also a clause in the contract from the writer of the script where he wanted authenticity, and he said, you can film this if you go west. We don't want any more filming in New Jersey, you know, the wilds of New Jersey.
Milton Royal, who wrote this play, his dream was for the company to do this on real locations in the real West. As he just said, not in Staten Island anymore. I mean, this is getting too crazy, right? So he had a plan that they would film it in at least 6 states. I think it was Nevada, Utah, Arizona, California, of course, and I'm missing something, Idaho, or I don't know, all these western places. And they actually started the publicity on it. Okay, go on, and it's a really fun story.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, and I think DeMille jumped on this because he wanted to get out of town anyway. I think he was hungry for adventure. They jump on a train. They go to Flagstaff. Okay, they're
Arizona.
They're planning to film the first scenes in Flagstaff. Now, there's the story that it was snowing and it didn't look right. For whatever reason, DeMille decided, hey, it just doesn't look right for the film that we have envisioned. They get back on the train, they come to LA, okay? He finds out about a barn in the Netherlands of a little place called Hollywood that he could rent for $250 a month to film this film. I think this would be a great discussion for us sometime about,
Yes.
would there have been a Hollywood if it hadn't been snowing in Flagstaff?
Well,
I wonder about
these
that.
These are the folkloric things, right?
Yeah.
But when they came here, there was already a whole bunch of film companies here
Mhm.
with studios and lots of activity going on. Even Kinemacolor with colored films. Yeah.
Could you just check the focus? It seems a tad bit
Oh,
soft
sure.
with all
Yeah.
that printing.
Yeah, you have to
Okay.
do that.
Thank you.
So anyway, as I'm doing that, so let's see.
That better?
Good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, that's
thank you.
Yeah, that is better.
Thank you.
Come to think of it, you're right. Yeah, just chime right in there. So anyway, this idea of shooting, you know, on these locations is really important. And when they got to, first of all, there was a lot of, they came very late. Let me go back. They were supposed to do all this filming in the summertime in the West. It would be easy to get there, shoot all these scenes. The snow scenes can be in the mountains up above Hemet. Many of these things were in plan, already in place. Even the publicity in Utah was already there. There was even some publicity of Red Wing falling off her horse in Idaho and hurting herself. Of course, they never shot in Idaho, but they used it anyway, right? So, in other words, they were running out of time, and it was not until already in late November that they couldn't go yet. Why? Because Jesse Lasky and Goldfish, particularly, they were pre-selling the film to independent distributors. So in other words, the independent distributor would already give them some cash in advance, taking a risk. Everybody's taking a risk. But they couldn't get enough money together by December, and they had to go. And DeMille and the rest of them said, "We're going." And Goldfish said, "No, we don't have enough." "No, we're going." And they jumped on that train, they got to Flagstaff, and it probably was snowing there, but you're right, it wasn't the right terrain, it wasn't anything they needed. They pushed straight on to Los Angeles because there was no time. They got to the Alexandria Hotel, downtown LA, where everybody went, and there, of course, they were making inquiries already where they're going to shoot. They needed a studio, and that's when they met guys named Burns and Revere. J.J. Burns, who later was the founder of Western Costume, and Burns was an outfitter of Western costumes and guns, and he knew extras and real Indians and horses. So these guys already had a studio, which was the barn. It was already a studio. Their name of their company, by the way, was called Fox Film. And I saw their logo. It's a little fox. It says Fox. It has nothing to do with William Fox. Fox Film, little fox, right? Zorro in Spanish. And they had already 2 studios in Hollywood in 1912. Now, while in 1912, right, these guys are doing this, Dustin Farnham already is at Universal making several films. He already has a ranch in California that he goes to on a regular basis. So you see how it is. When they came here to LA, in the folklore, it's as if they just got here and they, wow, there's a barn in Hollywood. We never heard of Hollywood. No, it's all false. It's all planned and everything. They were just running out of time. They went to this barn, which was already, Fred Mace, the famous comedian, already made several films there. There were already some other famous people there. And then they started to, like, we got to make this film quick, because they had other films waiting in line for this film to be done. The Virginian and other films were ready to go. So, do you mind if I
No,
go
you're
on?
good.
They arrived, they arrived here in December. 'Cause
Yeah, it was
we didn't
December.
say that.
December.
When they went through Arizona and arrived here in Hollywood, it was
But
around
December is getting near
mid-December.
Christmas already. This is crazy. They arrive near Christmas. Nobody's doing anything. But guess what? The first day of shooting was December 29th, correct?
Right.
December 29th, after Christmas, they're shooting this film.
I think we got a picture of that. Here's the
Oh,
play company.
Okay, now that's the truck
Uh-huh.
that would take them around. Now, let me tell you the locations they were going to use. First of all, we have the barn. The barn was used, the open stage that was there that Burns Revere built, was used for the English scenes, for interiors. If you know the history of the Squaw Man, I mean not the history of it, the story. It's just in a nutshell. It's about a lord who is dishonored by he's accused of stealing money, and then he's ostracized and he's kicked out of England, and he was framed as this bad guy, right? So he goes to America, to New York. He's in a restaurant, and some woman picks his pocket. But this cowboy who's in New York selling cattle notices, stops it, and gets his wallet back, and they become good friends. And he says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, I don't know what to do, more or less. He says, "Come out to California and be a rancher or something." And that's why he came to California with this cowboy, played by Reno. What's his name? Jay Reno. Lorraine, almost on my tip of my tongue.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway, that's the story. So they needed a seaport. They needed the mountains, because there's scenes in which. Let me go on quickly. And he comes out west. They're in the saloon, and he's like this greenhorn. And there's a guy that wants to take advantage of him and doesn't like him or something, and tries to shoot him in the back. But this Indian woman notices what's going on, and she kills the bad guy. She shoots him and saves his life. So this begins this kind of romance that he has with this Indian woman. The whole controversy over the Squaw man is that they have a half-breed child. This is like unheard of. This is melodramatic. And the half-breed, that's why the stage play was so big, right? Because he marries an Indian woman. God, it's unheard of. You don't have children with Indian women, you see what I mean? Because the hatred of the Indian was still strong in those days. Because the last of battles was, Wounded Knee was in 1890. This is 1913. It's only 23 years later. Can you imagine? There's still this animosity between Indians and everything. So anyway, they need all these different terrains. So the English scenes, as I said, interiors on the stage. But they needed a castle in England. So where did they go? They went to Castle York. Castle York is on Adams Boulevard and Western Avenue, on the northwest corner. And it's a beautiful castle. Do we have that? Okay. Well, anyway, it's a beautiful castle. It's gone now, by the way, if you're going to ask that next question. Don't even ask. But I do have pictures of it. And then they used, of course, San Pedro for the water scenes. They actually have a boat that burns. There's a whole scene of the boat burning and all this. And then there's scenes in which Red Wing saves his life again. He's up in the mountains in the snow, and he's frozen, and she finds him, takes him into a cave and warms him up and saves his life again. And so that was done up the mountains up in above Hemet. What do they call it? I can't remember. Yeah, something like that. There was a particular place. There's a famous shot which I found at the DeMille house showing the Lasky cowboys, and Cecilia DeMille, DeMille's youngest daughter, is on a horse, and she's there,
really?
with the cowboys up there above Hemet.
Cool.
So anyway, then they used for the train scenes with the the saloon where he gets shot or doesn't get shot and all this stuff. They needed somewhere where the trains go a lot, so they went out to Sun Valley, which was called Roscoe, California at the time. At the end of Vineland, where the freeway is, that is Roscoe or Sun Valley, right? And Sunland is further up, not too far from there, but this is Sun Valley. And they built a train station next to a track. What were the tracks there? There were several important things there. There was the Southern Pacific that went right up there. And those tracks are still there, and that's where the metro goes today. So if you go on one of those metro trains into the valley, you go around in the same route that DeMille and all those people took. And then, of course, there is the, right there was the train station, and there was an old switch there that you see in the scenes. And DeMille said in his autobiography that switch was still there in 1950-something. I went there. I walked all the tracks there, but I can't find a damn thing left there. And it's so frustrating. And just nearby, interestingly enough, in 1922, for the Mark of Zorro, Doug Fairbanks, who knew DeMille, they all know each other, he built all the sets for the Mark of Zorro there, right near where they did the Squaw Man, by the way. I found actually pictures of that set and the whole thing there. So anyway, let's see, what am I leaving out?
Mark, can you identify the hill behind the truck with the crew here?
Oh yes, yes I can. This is the main thing I wanted to say. I almost forgot. Thanks for bringing it up. They needed a ranch set. They needed a bunch of other sets, and then cattle country, you know, and ranches. Guess what they used? Are you ready? Are you all sitting down? Universal Studios. Not the tour, but the studios. Where was Universal in 1913? Universal was in their original site, which is now Forest Lawn. Right there, where the forest that became the Lasky Ranch, and I'll explain this in a minute.
Talk about that.
Just a word about Cecil B.
Yes.
DeMille.
Go.
These photos were all taken upon him. DeMille was very nostalgic and wanted to save everything. And he did telegrams and wires and all of that stuff. If he was alive today, his wife
He's
would
right in the
call
middle of the
orders
puppies.
and
That's
probably
down,
have
down,
them
down, to the
clean
right, to the
everything
right.
Oh, there
out.
it is, there it is.
There he is.
There he is.
So that's him there.
Oh,
And
yes.
these are the owners over here.
Yeah, that's Burns and
Burns and
Revere at the
Revere.
door, the businessmen, right? Okay, so let's see now. Universal. So Universal later couldn't buy that property. It was part of the Providencia Rancho. So they couldn't buy it. So they purchased by 1914 another property right next to it on the other side of Barrion Boulevard, which went right up to Lankershim. And they moved all their sets and all their offices and all their stuff over to the new Universal. So that's why in Bob Bertrand's book, the Arcadia book, and it's funny, it's lucky Bob asked me about this because I gave him a panorama shot showing Universal and said 1913. It shows all the people there. Hal Roach, by the way, and Harold Lloyd was in that group of the early Universal players. And they're on horses playing cavalrymen, right? I actually found them there and I blew it up for Hal Roach and showed it to him. He almost had a fit. He was like 100 years old at the time. But anyway, so they moved over. But this ranch, that's why the connection to the Lasky Ranch. Because that ranch before Lasky, before Universal, was the Nestor Ranch. The Nestor Feature Plate Company, the first studio in Hollywood at Gower and Sunset, they were using that first. And so Nestor was absorbed by Universal. So Universal then had it. And then since Universal couldn't buy it, they give the lease over to Jesse Lasky Feature Plate Company.
We have some
And
pictures
Jesse
of that.
Lasky keeps it going, would you believe, from 1914 all the way until when Forest Lawn was put in there in 1954 or something. Even though Paramount Ranch in Agoura was formed in 1926, they moved a lot of sets over to Agoura, but they kept that ranch. They had two ranches. Nobody realizes this. They had these two ranches, giant ranches. That's why Lasky's name is in the valley, is everywhere. You still see it. Okay, now we can move on.
Yeah, this is from the first day of filming of the Squaw Man. Let's move next. Here's that picture that Mark was talking
That's the
about.
saloon set that was right in Sun Valley on a... Oh yeah, I forgot to mention again. Gosh, there's so much about this because Bob Bertrand and I have been working on this for years. God, fire engines. Actually, those are police. Anyway, it's in my train of thought. What was it
Bob
again?
Bertrand and you were working
Yeah,
on
we
this
were working
for
on
years.
the
The Squaw Man set and where this was.
Yes, where this was. Thank you. I got it now.
I'm paying attention. There's going to be a quiz later, folks. I hope
Right.
you're...
I told you about the Southern Pacific line that went up. Now, they had that truck, but they couldn't bring everything over on the truck. So and by 1913, it was in May or June of 1913, Cahuenga Pass was finally linked to the Pacific Electric trolley cars. So they could pick up the trolley car at Hollywood and Vine, and take it right through Cahuenga Pass, and guess where they went? They went right to the North Hollywood station, which is being restored, and it happened to be a double-track system there. It was their Pacific Electric trolleys and the big freight trains that went up the Southern Pacific. So they would transfer all their equipment, whatever, off on that platform that's still there. The platform is still there, onto the train, which took them up the Sun Valley, and then the truck went up Vineland, which was a dirt road, leading in between vines of grapes and citrus groves all the way up to Sun Valley. So what did they use? They needed another train. They couldn't use the Southern Pacific line because there's trains going back and forth. How are you going to build a station on it? You can't do it. So it happens to be the Hanson Dam. The Hanson Dam wasn't there at the time. Hanson Dam, that whole area there is the Tahunga Wash. And guess what the Tahunga Wash has buried there for about 1 million years is gravel. That is the gravel pits of Los Angeles. They still are digging out gravel there for the Pacific Electric, for everything, for our cement, for whatever. And there were gravel trains there. It was a smaller gauge, a little bit, but they were all over the place, and there were all kinds of side tracks there. That's what they used. They rented a gravel train and a gravel track, and that's where they built everything. So, I mean, I went to the library there, I was searching, and I learned all about the gravel pits of Sun Valley. It's famous. They're famous for gravel. Okay, and they're proud of it. Okay, go on.
All right. Back to, so this is the barn, and here's some extras waiting for work outside of it. This would have been at Selma and Vine. Just,
should we talk about the barn now?
Yeah,
The
we'll talk
early
about the
days.
barn, yeah.
The early days of the barn.
Here's
Okay.
here's a good schematic of it back
Good.
then.
We just recently, Hollywood Heritage, figured out, because we found an actual article and an actual mention, that the barn was built in 1902. We all thought it was built in 1897, and it was actually built in 1902. And there were several families that owned it. The main one that we're concerned with is the Jacob Stern family. Jacob Stern was a big developer in Riverside and all over the place, along with the other early pioneer developers like Whitley and Cole and Wilcox and all of them, Lancashire. But this is the Hollywood area. So he had his home, one of his big homes, right in the middle of a citrus field on Vine Street. I have wonderful aerials that show you the house. The house today is located where the former Broadway department store building is, of course, and next to it is the Hollywood Plaza, which is now, what is that now? You know what, it's retirement hotel or something? I don't know what it is. Anyway, right there you see palm trees behind the Hollywood Plaza Hotel building. Those palm trees are from the original Jacob Stern property, and those are there because in their contract with the city of Los Angeles, no one's ever allowed to touch those palm trees. And they're supposed to be there forever. Of course, I don't know how long they're going to last. But you have little remnants of Hollywood, old Hollywood, still in Hollywood if you know where to look. So this is the area where the barn was. Across the street from their home, kitty corner at the southeast corner of Selma and Vine, was this barn, right? Now, what you see up there is the barn on the left, but in the middle was a laboratory building that Burns and Revere built because part of their business was laboratory work. Filmmakers needed a laboratory to develop their film. Laugh now, but digital. And on the right is that open stage that you can see in the different films, in the pictures that we have.
For those of you that don't know, you hear Mark referring to the Hollywood Historical Museum, and the reason why he does is the Hollywood Historical Museum is housed in this barn. So when you go visit the Hollywood Historical Museum, you're actually in the barn that we're talking about, where Squaw Man was made, and these other films that DeMille and Lasky made.
Many of these people here are members of Hollywood Heritage. Michael is from New Jersey, right? Which, of course, is the cradle of the film industry. And that's where the Nestor Film Company came from, New Jersey, Bayonne, New Jersey. And of course, New York, New Jersey. I mean, that's where all the filmmakers filmed, was in New Jersey, in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and all over the place. So Michael's not too far away from home.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, it turned out that the barn was an excellent place to make films. They took over the lease. You can see here they're already expanding. This is a short time after Squaw Man came out. I love this picture. This is the office over there that's still, well, as you know, still there in the barn. This is DeMille's office. I love this picture. You know, two lifelong friends here that, you know, they're kicking off a new empire. All right, so let's talk about Paramount itself.
Before you start that, just one quick thing. Up until the time of that picture, they're sitting there together, DeMille and Lasky. I worked for the DeMille estate for years, and I still do. But I went through all the papers before they went up to Brigham Young when they were donated. So I read all these telegrams. And during the period between 1913, when they were on the train going, and when they got here, and where they were living, and where they ate, and where they, all this stuff, DeMille had zero money. He had no money. And he was always sending a telegram to Jesse saying, I need $30. Will you please send me $30? And he would send them, you wire them this money. And you can see he had no money at the time. So he was really dependent on this enterprise to be successful. If this was a failure, oh, I don't want to think about it. And that was your question. He says, would the film industry have really caught on? Maybe it would have, yes. But then again,
Maybe
Paramount, which you're
Yeah.
going to get into
Yeah.
now, maybe never would have happened. Okay, now go on.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about Paramount. Now, there's a third piece to this puzzle here. Now, we've got Lasky, we got Zucker. Paramount. Paramount was actually a distribution company that was set up by this guy, W.W. Hodgkinson. And Mark can go into more detail about this, but up until this time, most of the distribution of films, there was no nationwide distribution. It was usually what was called states' rights. There would be distribution for a region or a state. Hodgkinson actually put together a bunch of distributors, got them together and created what he called Paramount Pictures. Now, Paramount, the name, what does it mean? It was there's stories, but some say it was an apartment building he passed on his way to work, just like the name, and it was alliterative. But that's where we get the name Paramount. Now, he needed a lot of filmmakers to be part of this enterprise, and so he put both Lasky and Zucker onto his board of directors. They worked things out on what was a 65-35 basis, which meant that the filmmakers got 65% of the till. Paramount, for the distribution fee, got 35% of the till. It looked like a really good deal, but within a very short time, Zucker and Lasky were seeing a lot of profits that they felt should be going into their pockets, go into this distribution wing of the company. So they staged a corporate coup, and they took it over, and they ousted Hodgkinson very early in the game. Zucker was a guy who never really liked to answer to anybody, so now he's lord of...
He's in charge.
He's in charge, and around the same time, they decide to merge. So here we go. We got...
Wait, before you do the
yeah.
merge.
Okay.
Before you do the merge. The idea was for Paramount was to bring in these producers and give them a piece of the action, as EJ just said. But it's not just Lasky and not just Zucker. There were several other film companies involved, and many of them from the stage. There was the Froman company, of the Froman brothers, who were all friends and they all knew each other. They wanted to invest and they wanted to make films. Hobart Bosworth, the famous stage star, had a company called Bosworth Company. He wanted in as well. So they gathered together, and there's a famous picture that I've got that show all their faces and their companies that make up this Paramount. Everybody would share in the profits, but as EJ just mentioned, it didn't work. They wanted more control over their own distribution. And yes, they did force Hodgkinson out, but it was amicable. Nobody sued each other or anything like that. But basically, Hodgkinson formed Hodgkinson Incorporation immediately and started to bring other companies in and just did the same thing, which successfully for several more years to come.
When Lasky would refer to Hodgkinson to Zucker, Zucker would say, "You mean the guy we're giving 35% to?" So Adolf Zucker didn't have much respect for Hodgkinson, and like EJ said, he wanted to control his own business. He didn't like partners. So what he did was he got all the board, everybody that was on the board together. He bought up a lot of the
Controlling
stock.
That's how you do it.
He went into the board meeting, they had a vote, and before Hodgkinson knew it, he was packing up his pencils, and Zucker put somebody else in control.
Now the merger.
Now the merger. Now this
1916.
is very interesting. Yeah, check out the year 1916. So this is Famous Players and Lasky Feature Play Company merging together. Now this, I think this is very interesting because there's a lot of nepotism at play here. You've got Adolf Zucker and his
Son-in-law?
his brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law.
Al Kaufman. I just went blank on his name. Okay, so they're brother-in-laws. Then you've got Jesse Lasky and Samuel
His
Goldfish, his brother-in-law, plus his best friend Cecil B. DeMille. So this is a lot of family ties going on here. Now check out the year 1916. This is when what we know today as Paramount really came together. Now, as you all know, we have just celebrated a year-long 100th anniversary of the founding of Paramount. Well, that's actually kind of the founding of Famous Players. if you really want to get technical about it, the 100th anniversary of Paramount, I think you could either make the case for 1916, 1914.
Well, I make the case,
yeah.
I'll tell you, I make the case the anniversary of Paramount is 1912, 1913, and 1914,
Yeah.
and that's it. 1916 is fine, but 1914 is when Hodkinson formed.
Yeah.
So we have famous players, 1912, Jesse Lasky, 1913, and we have Paramount, 1914. So that's pretty much our anniversary right now.
So-
1916 is just a merger.
Yeah. So we're in a 3-year, 100-year anniversary.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you very
There we
much.
are. All right, so now for a while there, the way that they would run things is Zucker still kind of controlled things from the East Coast. So this is famous players Lasky East. I mean, that's not the official name, but that's kind of how they did it. The movies that were made on the East Coast would say Adolf Zucker presents. Same thing would happen on the West Coast, and you can actually even see it here. Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company, and they would present the films that were made here as Jesse L. Lasky presents.
And that's when they came up with their slogan, the best show in town.
Yeah. Eventually, they
Not sure
decided.
they use it now, do they?
I don't think so.
I don't think
Not
so.
anymore. Not with Jackass and Bad
Yeah,
Grandpa.
that's right. It was. Yeah, you can actually see that logo up there. But it became problematic. They decided from then on to release everything, no matter where they made it, as Adolf Zucker and Jesse L. Lasky present.
Zucker was such a controlling but smart businessman that Lasky was worried that he would be next, because all the West Coast productions were Jesse L. Lasky presents, and all the East Coast was Adolf Zucker presents. And Lasky was making more pictures out on the West Coast, and he noticed that when they were, going to these premieres and stuff and watching these films, his name was appearing on the screen much more often than Zucker's was. So Lasky got on the wire and he said to Zucker, "Why don't we just make every picture a, Adolf Zucker, Jesse Lasky presents," because he figured Zucker's going to say, "You know what, this guy's out too. I don't want to see his name on the screen anymore."
You see how this develops? It's personalities. And that's how it is throughout the whole film industry to this day. It's all personalities fighting for this spotlight and this spotlight, and how much money am I going to make and how much am I going to lose. And, I mean, it's all a big gamble. And the funny thing is, Jesse Lasky was looking for gold, digging out there for gold, just like the 49ers, right? Well, his mother and everybody told him, that heck with this, digging for gold. There's gold in films. Dig it there. And it's safer. So you see the point is that they felt, yeah, you're right. Why should I be killing myself out in the gold fields when I could make it in films? Which was a crapshoot as well.
That's right.
But a more, I don't know, it's more, if you put your business plan together and figure out the kind of films that people might want to see, your stakes are not as, fragile as they might be digging for gold. Okay.
Now you can see that things were going well by 1919. By this picture, things had really filled up in Hollywood, but also things had filled up on the lot.
Yeah, show them
Now,
where you are.
this was the barn, right, Mark?
Yep.
Right there.
That's Selma and Vine.
Now notice how it's all filled up this whole block.
That's Sunset,
Yeah.
Argyle, and El Centro.
Yeah.
And Sunset and Vine and Selma.
Yeah, there's Vine, there's Selma. This is El Centro, right, Mark?
Yes.
And this would be
Argyle.
and this would be Vine. Vine right here.
No, that's
I'm
Sunset.
sorry, Sunset right here, and that's Vine.
Now,
right
right
there.
on the corner of Sunset and Vine, right there, was originally Home Savings, which is now Chase Savings.
Yeah.
Right? Well, there's a time capsule there on the corner. No, it's not a capsule, it's a plaque. Excuse me. There was a capsule, but when they pulled it out, it was all full of water.
Oh.
Anyway, but they put a plaque, and it says this is the site of the famous players Lasky Studios, etc. And originally, I would say in the 50s, they also put a plaque at Selma and Vine, but there was no place to put it, so they put it on the bank across the street, California Savings, and DeMille had a big reunion party at the bank. But it says on the plaque, on this site, was where they filmed the Squaw Man.
Oh.
But actually, it's across the
Across the
street.
street.
You see how it gets mixed up in history.
They,
Yeah,
they did
come
the
on.
same thing for Buster Keaton's studios over here.
Yeah,
just
Lillian
Buster-
Way and
Lillian
Eleanor,
Way.
the Buster Keaton plaque is on the wrong
It's on the
corner.
wrong corner as far as the Buster Keaton.
So, yes.
This gives you a little bit, now this is turned around a little bit. The barn would be here. This is the corner that Mark was just saying about.
The barn's there in this shot.
Barn
That's
is,
it.
That's what I'm saying. The barn is here, but this would have been where that.
That's Home
Chase-
Savings
Home
is.
Savings, yeah. And I believe that was where Mary Pickford's
Yes, yes, the
dressing
bungalow.
room was. One
Yes.
time. Which is kind of funny because I think if you look at this thing, yeah, it says Mary Pickford's dressing room, which
Yes.
is there.
It's supposed to be number 10.
And then over here, I think, was Douglas Fairbanks. It's kind of funny they were at the far corners, but they still somehow managed to get together.
Wait.
So that barn corner is actually that corner that's the parking lot right now, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Steve Allen?
Yes, exactly.
Now, 1919, we're on that. In 1919, Douglas Fairbanks leaves Paramount. He becomes independent. In 1919, he and Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith form United Artists. But of course, they have contracts with other companies for a while. But they have their entity, it's done. But Doug moves from Paramount to a new studio site. And of course, since everybody knows each other, guess where he moves to? He moves to the former famous Players Lasky site at Melrose and Bronson, where Mary Pickford and Zukor was, you see. That was, at the time, a guy named Mr. Clune, who owned theaters in Pasadena. He bought it because Zukor got cold feet because one of the Froman brothers, which one is it, died on the Lusitania. Charles, I think.
Charles, yeah.
Charles dies on Lusitania. That's his bankroll. So he gets cold feet and moves Mary Pickford and everything back to New York, leaving this empty studio there, which Mr. Clune picks up. So Mr. Clune is making all kinds of films there. So by 1919, Doug needs a studio. Of course, Doug knows Mr. Clune, and Clune says, you can take over the whole studio and put your own name on it, which he does. Douglas Fairbanks Studio. So right across the street, which we're going to get to it, was the Brunton and United Studios, where Mary Pickford was working when she left Paramount for First National. It's very complicated, but you see all these historical studio sites were used by all these people. It's like a shell
It's a big
game.
shell game, yeah.
And it's taken me all these years to figure out where everybody went, who's coming and going, and to this day, it's still driving me nuts. Okay.
All right, here's some of the stars now. Like we said, Zucker and Lasky really saw the value of stars. You see here we have William S. Hart. I give tours at the William S. Hart Mansion. I'm on the board of directors up there. There's Hart, here's Mary Pickford, Cecil, and Lasky. I love how she's still playing the little girl there. How old was she at this time?
Oh yeah, she played the little girl for quite a while
Yeah.
until finally she cut her curls. It was a lot of press and everything. She cut the curls. I've got pictures of it. The curls were then donated to the LA County Museum, where they still are today.
Still there today.
Yes, they were in a museum. Her curls.
This was one of the big stars that they brought over. This was Geraldine
Geraldine Farrar.
Farrar, and they really went all out. They built her own dressing room. There was a lot of publicity about the bringing her from the Met in New York. They brought her in a special train.
You notice how this all looks?
Yeah.
It looks like farms, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All the studios were built like farmhouses. Open stages. This is her fancy dressing room. Look at this. It looks like a place where you store the gardening equipment. But see, she didn't care. None of them cared because they made the films in this crude way, in these crude places in the West. Now, in the East Coast, it's a completely different story. In 1919, again, Paramount builds the famous Paramount Astoria Studio in Long Island,
Which we have a picture of.
which is today the Kaufman Astoria Studio. And I can tell you, and I have to admit it, I helped save that studio. How? Well, in the 70s, I was called as an expert on the studios, right, by the Planning Commission of New York City. I met with this guy there, and they said that the Army Pictorial Center owned it because during the World War II, you see, well, I better go back. During the Depression, Paramount lost the studio to bankruptcy. He went to the bank. It became a rental studio, and eventually the Army took it over during the war, and they owned it. After the war, they didn't know what to do with it, so it stayed empty pretty much until the 70s for another 40, 50, 30 years or so, pretty much rotting there. So the city of New York said maybe we should recondition it, make it into a studio again for revenue, and bring filmmaking back to New York. So I came out there and we toured it. It was pretty bad shape, but the paint was peeling. So they said, well, what do you think? And I said, this is all solid reinforced concrete building. It's in perfect condition. You just take the paint off, redo it, put some new plumbing in and some electrical, you got your studio back. And that's what they did. And to this day, it's one of the most famous studios on the East Coast.
That's where they make the Muppets still.
And-
Actually,
right?
Sesame Street. Sesame Street. Yeah.
That's where Sidney Lumet and who's the other?
Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, yes, but Woody Allen. God, I couldn't come out. Woody Allen. They make all their films there. They love that studio. It's their studio. Thanks to me.
Mr. Martin. Oh, I just threw this in because I think it's a great story. We just showed you Geraldine Farrar. This is Lou
Yes.
Telligin there,
Right.
and there's Samuel
Being
Goldfish.
visited.
He just never looked happy, did he?
Never.
But
And who's in the armor?
I don't.
Hobart Bosworth.
Oh, Hobart Bosworth, who is also one of these.
One of the founders of
one of the
Paramount.
founders. But the thing about Lou Telligin, he was in this film. This was actually filmed at what Mark was just talking about, the Lasky Ranch.
Exactly.
But Lou Telligin was married to Geraldine Farrar. Tragic story. They got divorced later, and
Yeah.
about 10 years later, he killed himself with sewing scissors. I can think of a lot of bad ways to kill yourself.
But
one of
that's
the
why
worst.
he's there. He's
Yeah.
actually in another film. And he's visiting his wife on the set of Joan the Woman. This is the film called Joan the Woman, 1916, about Joan of Arc. It was a great film, but thousands of men battling it out in the Lasky Ranch.
It's really amazing too because the budget for this thing. Now the Squaw Man. Now think about this. In 1913, 1914, right in there, the Squaw Man cost $15,000. By the way, it made about $250,000 profit back then. Pretty much tax free. $15,000 budget. This one had a budget of, I think it was $300,000.
Yeah, this was serious.
So you can see how in just a couple of years how everything has just magnified.
Yeah, but you have to remember also they didn't build a little cracker train station. It just falls apart. No, they built. You can see in the background they built 17th century French villages, and they hired people that knew how to joust and knew how to fight in armor. And I mean, this was a serious film, and the interiors were full of antiques and all kinds of beautiful costumes. Cost a fortune to make.
Here's some more Paramount stars. You see Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford over here.
Yeah, I better explain this one. Doug is visiting the Paramount studio at Vine and Selma because remember where he is already. He's over at the Clune studio on Melrose and Bronson. He was doing the Three Musketeers there at the time. And he's dressed as one of the Three Musketeers. And on the right is Zukor, then Mary Pickford, of course. Then there's DeMille and Alan Dwan. Remember him directing Mary Pickford in those early shots? Well, he's directing the Three Musketeers at Clune. And the woman up there is
Geraldine Farrar.
no, the writer, Mary's writer.
Francis Marion.
Francis Marion, thank you. God, thank you out there. I can rely on you. That's Francis Marion, who wrote so many of the films for Mary Pickford, etc. But you see how everybody is still the family. It doesn't matter what studio they're in or whatever. They all share each other's back lots, equipment, stars. Different stars go from one studio to another, and to this day they're still doing this. But it's just interesting. Yeah, you were going to say?
I was going to mention one thing. You see Zucker and Pickford together. Pickford seemed to really have a soft spot in her heart for Adolf Zucker. And you notice at this point we don't see Goldfish.
Yes.
Goldfish.
He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone by this time, and the reason was he had the bad judgment to badmouth Zucker in front of Mary Pickford, and she reported it back to the boss, and he was out. Now, Goldfish later became, his name was added to Metro Goldwyn, New York, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, but he was never really part of MGM.
The reason is his partner was Edgar Selwyn.
Right.
So they formed Goldwyn.
Goldwyn.
So he changed his name to Goldwyn, and Edgar Selwyn sued him and said, "How dare you use my name?" He says, "There's no law against it," and of course there isn't. So he kept it, but Selwyn was like storming away, like he took my name, and kicked him out of the studio as well.
But I
Very
think,
soon after the partnership of Goldwyn, Lasky, DeMille, and Zucker, this incident happened with Pickford. And just to attest to what a strong businessman Zucker was, he decided after going into partners with these guys, I can't work with Goldwyn, and he's Lasky's brother-in-law, so I guess I'm going to have to go start over. So he thought about it, and he went to DeMille, and he went to Lasky, and he said, look, I can't work with Goldwyn, and one of us has to go. So you guys need to vote on it, and if you want me out, you know, you vote me out, that's fine, no hard feelings, but you two got to make the decision. So DeMille sort of wanted nothing about the decision making, and Lasky had to decide, do I keep my brother-in-law or do I stay with Zucker? Well, his brother-in-law was out because he knew that Zucker was where the money was.
that made
So-
very interesting Thanksgiving
If
conversation.
anybody ever has a question about,
Yeah, but you know, business is business, and all of them stayed friends lifelong, their whole life. So, there you go.
Okay, so Paramount bought a bunch of theaters. This is a great advertisement that Mark has here. This is some of the big palaces they had around the world. Let's skip on through.
I better explain this one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, why are all these people out there at the studio? This is at the Selma. They used to call it the Vine Street Studio. That was everybody called it that. Like they always call MGM Metro. You know, I'm going to Metro. Well, this is Vine Street Studio. And in 1922, after several Hollywood scandals, the death of Wallace Reed, etc., and the death of William Desmond Taylor, the people were up in arms against Hollywood for scandal. So they hired a former Postmaster General, Will Hayes. Will Hayes came out here to placate the public, saying, Hollywood is not a crazy place. Everybody goes to work early in the morning and early to bed. So he started the Motion Picture Production Association, Producers Association. This is the first day when Will Hayes came west, and he went to visit all the studios. And he's standing up there on the platform. There's DeMille.
There's DeMille right there.
Right, Will Hayes, and he's being introduced to the industry. He was over at Universal. He was at Hal Roach Studios. He was just everywhere around Hollywood being introduced. That's what that is.
Gloria Swanson, one of the biggest stars to come out of Paramount in those days. This is an interesting picture. She was a good businesswoman. She's getting her paycheck, I believe, here in.
Looks like it.
Yeah, but this is a really great one. Now,
Oh,
Mark
yes.
mentioned the Lasky Ranch, which is now Forest Lawn Cemetery, across from Warner Brothers, where I work. Now, this is really interesting. This was from a movie, and I got to get the name because I always
Beyond the
forget
Rocks.
this. Beyond the Rocks. Thank you. Now, this is the Swiss Alps that they built here.
Yes.
Okay.
They built the
Yeah.
Swiss Alps.
So look at that. That's just a backdrop, not a backdrop.
Yeah, but wait a
a set.
minute. I have another picture that shows them actually all standing on this
Yeah.
thing. You know how dangerous that is? I mean, that thing is hollow,
Yeah.
and it's a big deal, and they're really tiny on it, you know? It's how they got onto it, I don't know, but that's the old days of Hollywood, to build these giant sets and everything, and the famous stars like Gloria actually was put on it.
Mm-hmm.
She went on this. Now, about Gloria, real quick. There's a new book I just saw over at Book Soup on Gloria. And Gloria comes from Chicago, from the S&A Film Company. In the early days, she married Wallace Beery, of all people. I know, it's hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And they eventually moved out west. Wallace Beery went to Universal to work. This is in let's see, when is this? 1913, 14, 15, really early. Gloria went over to the Mack Sennett Company because Gloria was a Mack Sennett bathing beauty and had pies in the face, would you believe it? And then it was while she was doing her thing by going from one studio to another that DeMille saw her, loved her, and the rest is history. So she always believed that DeMille discovered her, which is true. Mack Sennett really discovered her, but not for the right kind of film. She became a serious drama queen, see, and she credits DeMille. So on Sunset Boulevard, when she goes and meets DeMille, you know, and she hugs him and he hugs her, and he treats her like patronizingly. Well, she was younger, you know, and it was like his daughter. It was his creation. So in Sunset Boulevard, which is my favorite film, of course, is because there's the fine line of real Hollywood and the fake Hollywood. Norma Desmond is really Mary Pickford, you know, and they wanted her to play it, but she wouldn't touch it. And the whole situation, Eric von Stroheim directed, of course, Gloria Swanson in, what was it, Queen Kelly. What? Queen Kelly, right? So, and of course, it's a Paramount film. They all worked for Paramount. They all knew Jesse Lasky. Everybody knew each other. So this film, William Holden was a Paramount star. So this film was shot on the Paramount lot, pretty much, is sort of this strange situation that Billy Wilder just salivated over. Because he moved to the hotel on Sunset Boulevard.
Garden of Olive.
No, across the street. Chateau Marmont. And Billy told me, I interviewed him many times, he used to sit out the window there and write. And he looked at the Garden of Olive to get inspiration. That was Alla Nazimova's house and property. And he would sit there and think about the early days of the silent industry and would write this script, and then eventually it became this film, which to this day is sort of like a legend. The whole film is a legend. Buster Keaton is in it.
Right.
I mean, all their friends are in this film pretending that they are legends, and they are legends. It's this fine line, which I just love.
One
Okay,
interesting
go
thing
on.
about this film is this also starred Valentino. Now, at the end of her life, she really wanted to see this again, but it was a lost film at that
it's
time.
lost.
But one of the great things about the internet is the fact that a lot of these lost films are being found around the
Oh, I
world.
hope they find this one.
And they did. They did find it.
They did?
They did find
Oh,
it. Yeah, you can
can't
get
wait
it on
to
DVD
see
now.
this.
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah.
I better talk to you.
Yeah. Just some other stars. Douglas Fairbanks Jr.
Oh yeah, wait, before that, I have a story. I have a story about this photo. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. This is a whole other show, which I will do one day. But in a nutshell, this is Douglas Fairbanks Sr.'s son, right? They were estranged for years. There was a divorce, all kinds of troubles. But the mother had no money. She came out to California, and Doug wouldn't give her any money. So she had to earn money, and who was the kid to earn the money? It was her son. Doug didn't like this very much, and she had, because of Jesse Lasky and other people that they all knew, Doug Jr. was put into things. And particularly because of Jesse Lasky, was brought over to Paramount. Doug wasn't at Paramount anymore, remember? So he brought him over there, and he was given a good contract, enough that he could have his first car. That's his first car for his first film, Steven Steps Out. And it's about a kid that goes, that's kidnapped in North Africa or something. It's a kind of exciting thing. Doug Jr. loved his father, but couldn't get any emotion out of him. Couldn't get a hug out of him or any acknowledgement. Just didn't like him in the business. But little by little, at this time, if Steven Steps Out, this is the fun part, Jesse did a publicity campaign, and he tied Junior into the early days of Hollywood. How did he do this? He had Junior go and meet Cornelius Cole himself, Colonel Cornelius Cole of Coleville, which is Gower Street and Melrose. That's where Cole's whole estate was, and his farmhouses were there, and all of his citrus groves. This is 1923. In 1923, Cornelius Cole was 101 years old. Cornelius Cole is one of the early pioneers of California, let alone the movie industry or Hollywood itself. So I have pictures I found which just blew my mind, showing the young Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Cornelius Cole. In other words, old Hollywood and new Hollywood together. What a campaign. Okay, now you can move.
All right. This is also Lasky Ranch. Now this is amazing. This is a Connecticut Yankee from 1921. And what's really amazing about this is that's now Forest Lawn. A lot of the people that worked on these productions are now buried there, which I think is just absolutely amazing. Gasoline Gus. This was actually a Fatty Arbuckle movie. This happened
A Paramount.
right before the scandal broke with Virginia Repe. This was.
Oh, and I
his
just
last
picked
film.
up, there's a new book too. By the way, if you want these books I'm mentioning, Jeff can get them, or already has them. Do you have that, Jeff?
I have
The new Arbuckle book.
about the scandal.
I have a copy of one for you.
Good. And also,
Is
well,
that the
anyway,
one named after
what,
the
what?
room she died in?
say it again.
Is that the one named after the room she died in?
Yes, exactly.
I just saw that.
It's the room at the
At
St.
the
Francis Hotel. Yeah, and he names it the room. It's
They
2135 or
confused
something.
that with The Shining, because that has a hotel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Ah, boy,
All
I love
right, this is also, I mean, these are amazing sets. We'll skip through this really quickly. Another one, Pony Express. This was all Lasky
it. You
Ranch.
see how big the studio was out there?
Yeah, this is what Mark was talking about, the Astoria Studios.
There it is.
And this is the Brunton Studios.
Okay, I better explain that.
Yeah.
All right, now, right down below, I'll need you do
Okay,
the point.
sure.
Down below is the Clune Studio, or Douglas Fairbanks Studio, at Bronson and Melrose, today Raleigh Studios. Across the street, point there, is, when this picture was taken, Brunton, okay? Now, before Brunton, there was a company that was connected to Triangle, connected to Doug Fairbanks. Doug worked for Triangle originally, and they had a new company called Peralta Films. Peralta Films in 1918 was going to be more of an independent company using independent directors and stars. Agnes Ayres, and who was with Valentino in The Shake, right? She was in the Peralta Films. So they were leasing from Mr. Clune space, okay? So they needed a back lot. So they started to build, Peralta was building their sets across the street there on their back lot. And then Peralta with Triangle, got a lot of money. They started to build their own stages there, so they didn't need the Clune stage, which was only one stage. They needed more space. So they started to build more stages. Now, point there, the first two. Yeah, that one and the next one, right there. Those are the first two stages, but they were glass stages in those days. And in other words, glass panels on the sides and all this. And then finally, World War I is happening, and they're making, Peralta was making already 4 major films with 4 major directors and 4 stars about World War I. One of the stars is Agnes Ayres, and one of the directors is Wallace Worsley, who directed Hunchback of the Notre Dame later. Then there was Al Green, who directed Mary Pickford later. And there was 2 more directors. I can't remember. Wallace Reed was there as one of the stars. And also this actor who played King George of England. He looked just like him with the beard and everything. He's in the. So I found this shot in the garage of Wallace Worsley's son on the floor. It was a group shot showing all the Peralta people, all the cameramen and everybody on the Clune lot in 1918. What a find, right? So then, in 1921, Mr. Brunton, he's getting ill. He has cancer, unfortunately. He was a great guy. He was a set builder, studio owner, studio builder. Everybody knew him and loved him. He was a Scotsman. He went back to Scotland to die, which he did. So he gave the studio over to his assistant, Mike Levy, and Mike Levy turned it into the United
I Studios. think we got pictures of that.
Okay.
And by the way, this is Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Oh yeah, Hollywood Cemetery is there, and who just mentioned, was that you, Michael, or something, in which many of the Paramount stars and directors are buried next to the studio, like DeMille, for example, and Valentino, and Lasky.
And Valentino.
Among others.
Yeah.
Go.
Here's another
Okay,
picture.
this is a great angle here. This is the, on the right is the Clune Studio, which is then, when this was taken, it was Douglas Fairbanks, and those are the sets there for His Majesty the American, one of the first films he made there. He made a whole bunch of films there, but the 2 greatest films was The Mark of Zorro and 3 Musketeers, which I'm proud of. So at the studio where I've been for all these years, I have big blow-ups all around the studio showing all this. Showing Doug there and with the 3 Musketeers and everything. And the people that work there just love the roots, the historic roots of their lot.
Isn't it amazing to see Hollywood that
And that's Hollywood in
Yeah.
1920, look.
It's amazing.
That's Van Ness going up there,
Yeah.
Melrose and Santa Monica Boulevard, there's nothing there. It's farms.
There's another one of Brunton.
Oh, go back. Can you go back? Okay, point up to the big stage. Okay, the big stage right there. Right there. Yes, that was built by the Brunton studio people. It's a double stage, and you can take the wall away, right? Well, this is a very historical stage at Paramount today because this is the Star Trek stage where all the Star Trek films and TV shows were shot. And today, NCIS LA is using the top part of it for their whole set. And there's a scene, that if you, did anybody watch this show? NCIS LA? No? Linda Hunt plays a part in it, this wonderful actress. And she's supposed to have a backstory of being a producer in Hollywood. So they had me come in, because I do work for the art directors, and I put historic pictures of old Hollywood on her set. And to this day, the show's been on, I think, 3 years or 4 years. They didn't touch her backstory yet. My pictures are nobody even knows what the hell I'm doing there. It's just so frustrating sometimes, you know. All right. So what you're looking at now is the Brunton Studios, and you see there's bungalows in the middle. You see little roofs there. Those are the bungalows for the stars. So when Valentino left Paramount after Monsieur Beaucaire and formed Ritz-Carlton Productions, his own productions, he moves to the studio lot, and he has one of those bungalows. It's a Tudor-style bungalow. And get this, all those bungalows are gone now, except for Valentino still exists on the lot. Isn't that interesting? All right, go. That's the glass stages I was telling you about that the Peralta Company were building. And then, of course, Robert Brunt with his name on it. But I also have the same exact shot. It says Peralta on it. Next. That's them building that stage I was telling you about where Star Trek and NCS LA. That is it again. On the left is the art department. That is the art department where all the Star Trek TV shows sets were designed and built right across the street from that building. Next. That's the back lot of Peralta, Brunton, United, and when Paramount took over the lot in 1926, it became part of the Paramount back lot. And like, that's part of it. Look, they had a ship set, they had a backing there. I mean, that is Marathon Street, right in the foreground. And originally, Brunton United owned all that property, but when Paramount went in, to save money, I guess, I don't get it, they sold off all the frontage on Melrose, and businesses, hotels, and restaurants, and everything were built there, like Nick Adele's, for example. There was even a hotel there called the Paramount Hotel. It's all gone now because in the 80s, Paramount bought it all back, so now it's all part of the Paramount lot again. It's just amazing the real estate deals made during those years. Next.
I want to show you one thing before we move on.
The Adams rib. The Adams rib. Oh yeah, that. I thought you were going to point at the skeleton.
The skeleton's great too.
That's from Adam's Rib, DeMille's film, Adam's Rib. All right, go on.
Check out that little. It looks like a little glitch up there on the mountain.
Hollywood sign.
It's an H
It's
for
that.
Hollywood High School.
So that's the start
They
of the
took
Hollywood
the
sign.
Hollywood H down for Hollywood High in 1923 to build the Hollywood Land sign.
That I didn't know.
Yeah. Which is, by the way, one of 6 signs in the Hollywood Hills. This was just one. It was the outpost sign. Then there was further going west was Beverly Crest, Beverly Terrace. Oh God! And there were 2 more. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I happen to live in an area near West Hollywood called Beverly Crest, and I remember as a kid the Beverly Crest sign, just like that, lying on the side of the hill. Because they pushed it down. It was sitting there. Just like when the land fell off the Hollywood sign, it was lying there on the side for years until the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce said, let's take the land away and just leave it as the Hollywood sign.
I love that, seeing the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, that's the San Fernando Valley.
That open, you know, it's just amazing.
You should check out my other book, San Fernando Valley.
Yeah. This is what Mark was talking about, the Valentino bungalow.
There it is. There it is.
And here's a picture of Valentino out in front of it.
Now this is the confusion. Valentino worked for Paramount, yes. But he was working, but he never worked on this lot for Paramount. He worked at Selma and Vine like everybody did. See, he left there before Paramount left. Paramount left Selma and Vine in 1926.
I think we got a picture of that
The
too.
year of Valentino's death, by the way. But when Valentino left for Ritz-Carlton early on, he went to that lot. So there's a confusion that Valentino was on the lot, but not with Paramount. With Ritz. See what I mean? There's a confusion all the time. This is the key ceremony of Mike Levy, of United Studios giving the key to Jesse Lasky to here's the key now to the studio, which then became Paramount Lot.
Yeah, because they'd outgrown everything at the Selma and Vine lot. They said, we're going to get some new real estate. You see some pictures. They immediately started a transformation and a revitalization of United. This is Lasky and Zucker looking at plans for some of the changes here. What they did was they actually knocked down some of the sound stages over at Selma and Vine and moved some of the buildings over.
Not sound stages.
But not sound stages, I'm sorry. Stages, thank you. Sound hadn't arrived yet, so
It's
these
an
are
easy
stages.
mistake to make.
That's right. Here's some, when
They
they're
were
rebuilding
literally
it.
dismantling what they could to bring over to the new Paramount lot. I mean, but they had to knock down some of the concrete buildings and things because the lot was sold. And the deal was they would remove most everything from it, except for a few buildings that the new owners wanted to keep. And of course, the barn did not, it was not in the plan to save the barn. It was going to be demolished along with everything else. That's when the decision was made by DeMille and Lasky, mostly DeMille, to remove the barn off that lot and bring it to Paramount with them as a good luck charm. And they did. They brought it over to Paramount, put it down, and fixed it all up. And there's even that's a picture of Louise Brooks pretending she's painting the barn. She has a brush in her hand, though.
I think Adolphe
She's
Mongeau
nicely
is in
dressed.
it, too.
Adolphe Mongeau is in the shot as well, yes.
Here's some of the new stages. I love this one because check out the planes over here. That
Oh,
might
yeah.
have been the wings
You know,
here.
I never noticed that.
Yeah. One of the things that they also built was the Bronson Gate.
Yes, this is important. There were no pictures available of the building of the Bronson Gate until I started. This was in the early 80s. I knew everybody. I've been writing an encyclopedia of movie studios since the 70s. And I met with everyone. Went to every studio around the whole country. I met with every owner of every studio, every manager, every retired person to see what they had in their collections, right? So I met with the lot manager of Desilu, because remember Desilu was the RKO side of the lot. And he said, you know what, I found some stuff in an old closet, and there were these original negatives of the building of the Bronson Gate. And it shows it actually in all the stages of being built. So he gave them to me. Thank you very much.
I love this very much. I've never noticed this now. I've never really looked at this very closely, but
Yes.
when we blow it up, it actually tells us the date, September 3rd, 1926, 9 a.m.
Tells you exactly. I have this whole concept, and also the building of the administration building, which is still there, on Marathon Street.
So this is the finished gate. Now they changed it a little bit. I think some earthquake regulations.
1932,
Yeah.
Long Beach earthquake.
33.
33 is it? Thank you. And at the Long Beach earthquake, many of these steeples and things were falling on people, killing, in cars. So there were new regulations, as EJ just said. They had to take down. So finials, you see these finials up there on buildings all around downtown LA were taken off. They were just removed from all over Los Angeles area. That's why you don't see them. But Paramount later put up a fiberglass version of it. But they took that away. So nothing's there now.
And here's a finished.
Oh, another thing I have to mention. You see what says Paramount Pictures? That was blue glass. They had lighting behind it. So at night, it was just beautiful lighting of blue glass behind it. Why don't they put it back?
Now here's an interesting thing about it. It says Paramount Pictures, but that's not the official name of the studio yet.
Oh, yeah.
I think we got some pictures of that. First off, let's look at
Oh, yeah,
just the
this.
Bronson Gates from the inside. This was the original Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. This is a publicity photo, and you see all the blondes trying to get into the studio, so that's something there. The wardrobe building that Mark was kind of talking about. I think Edith Head had her office on the 3rd floor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I have to explain about Western. Here we go again. J.J. Burns, who was with the Lasky Company, with the Squaw Man, remember? He was the outfitter. He formed Western Costume Company in downtown L.A. And then later, when all this was going on, he built the Western Costume Building right next door to the Paramount Costume Building. It's this connection, the early days of Paramount, all these people still were going on. It's a most amazing story of how everybody was just incestually together helping each other or making money off each other.
Okay, now this is what I started talking about. Now check out, Mark was talking about the building of the administration building, which is now the Sumner Redstone building,
That's
right?
right.
But look up here, now here's the name. Now this is a mouthful. Okay, remember, they hadn't changed their name to Paramount Pictures officially. Everybody kind of knew it as Paramount, but look at the name of the actual company at this point. Paramount Famous Lasky Corporation, and there's the West Coast Studios, okay? Now, that kind of talks about those three entities we mentioned before. You got Paramount, you got Famous Players, you got Jesse L. Lasky, but that's just too much. Now, if you look here, I think on the next one, you can't really read this, but that says Paramount Publix Corporation.
I better explain that. Publix was the new name of their theater chain around the world. Publix Theaters. So there was separate corporations that had to do with the money, you see, with the revenues coming in. So Publix was, then it gets even more confusing. It becomes the holding company for everything. And then they remove that after a couple of years. And then they take it away altogether. Then they put Paramount Pictures Holding Company. I'm telling you, I have a list, which I put together, chronological, which is at least 10 or 15 name changes all the way from about 1920 to 1916 all the way up to the 80s. Now it's Paramount Pictures Corporation, but then it says, what does it say, CBS Paramount? Or Paramount CBS? Because CBS owns Paramount. You see what I mean? I mean,
it's crazy. So it wasn't officially even known as Paramount Pictures until the 30s. So that's what I was talking about. Even it's so much easier when you're talking about like Warner Brothers, which we did earlier.
It's corporate history. Corporate history is confusing.
It's very confusing.
Remember, it's NBC Universal, you know. CBS Paramount. You figure that out.
EJ,
Yes.
didn't the name Paramount Pictures come in after the bankruptcy?
After the bankruptcy, yes, it came in. And I don't think it actually was official till like 1935,
Bankruptcy
1936.
was a serious matter.
Yeah.
All the studios were going bankrupt.
And how
They
you
had
doing,
to
by the way?
save
Good to see
each
you.
other. That's what they did. They saved each other by doing these machinations with holding companies, and they had to get rid of their Astoria studios, I mentioned. They got rid of that property, they downsized, you know, the usual.
This is just a nice photo. I like this. This is right inside the gates. This is just a crowd showing. I believe they're showing like their roll call for 1926. Some of the things they've done.
This had to do with a pamphlet I've got, which is in full color. It's incredible, 1927. It is a campaign to show the public and the stockholders of the company that everything is great. We have this honor roll, we have 1 million pictures coming, all the people are out there, they're all yelling, yes, we're all going to be successful. This whole pamphlet is all about that. And that's what this picture is. And they dragged out a bunch of their stars too, like Clara Bow and others, to push it, to push this new campaign.
Now there was a lot of big things happening, of course, in the 20s. Not the least of which would be the onslaught of talkies.
You mean
which
the
changed
revolution?
The revolution of talkies coming through. This is Esther Ralston. She's showing, I believe she's showing like a Vitagraph, Vitaphone.
What this is, we won't get into the history of sound because it is a different lecture and a book I'm actually working on with a descendant of Kellum DeForest, what's his first name?
Lee DeForest.
Lee DeForest, Kellum DeForest. I work for him at Archeo Research Library. But she's a descendant, so we're going to do a book on all the different sound inventions and the different companies that popped up around this time, because everybody was waiting for Warner Brothers to make it or break it.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Warner Brothers wouldn't make it, then nobody would make it. There would be silent films for who knows how many more years to come. So when Don Juan came out, it was a success, and when The Jazz Singer came out, it was a success. Everybody was poised already with the different sound equipment they were buying or developing. Walt Disney, actually, with his partner Patrick Powers, actually had Cinephone right at this time. Cinephone was the Disney sound. They actually located themselves where? At the old Clune Studios, and they were there for a while. So I mean, I'm telling you, so what they had was there was the Vitaphone system, which was discs, and there was the Fox case system, which was sound on film. So everybody was competing with discs or sound on film. Guess who won? Sound on film. So what this is a wax recording. So when you, on the stage, when they're singing or something, they're actually recording on a wax cylinder, not cylinder, excuse me, a wax disc, which would then later be made into a vinyl disc, which would then be sent to, guess what, to all the theaters that they would have a special machine next to the projector. They'd have to synchronize the starting of the film with the putting of the record. I mean, it was so crude.
Very cumbersome. Let me just talk about this.
Here's Clara.
Sound changed everything overnight, and it even brought in a whole new wave of stars. Now, Clara Bow was probably the biggest star at Paramount at this time. She got a lot of her audience because of her frenetic movements and her just zest for life. Well, because of the crudeness of the early sound equipment, now she didn't have a bad voice, but her movements had to be reeled in, so she couldn't move as much.
Right. You know why? Because they had to hide the microphones in flowers or who knows where. They then started to dangle this giant microphone, it was that big, above them, but she's moving around quite a lot. And, you know, how do you follow her? You know, I mean, this was a revolution in sound. There were directors and actors that fell by the wayside. They never made it. Others adapted to it and got into it. Watch Singing in the Rain again, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
This is, I find this very ironic. Now, and Mark can go into this about how the real headquarters of Hollywood has historically been New York.
Right, New York.
New York. And so this was where the Paramount building, their headquarters was built. What I think is very ironic about this is they use the word stability in 1928, okay? This is a year away from the stock market crash. This is right after talkies.
This is for the stock. This is for the stockholders' consumption.
So this was maybe they're in the eye right before the storm here.
But look at this magnificent building they built with the beautiful theater inside with brass and bronze, and it was one of the great theaters of the East Coast. On the top of the roof, you can't see it on the shot, there was a giant Tiffany glass, it was not a lamp, it was a beacon. It was a Tiffany beacon with different colors that would circle around New York. Wow, what a thing. Guess what? The theater's gone now, the beam is gone, everything's gone, the building's there, but it's just an office building today.
The building's still there, the theater's there, it's now a Hard Rock Cafe.
Hard Rock,
And when you go in, you can still see, it looks like a theater. Like
Well, you said parts of it are still there?
Oh yeah, like the inside you can see. Like,
that's good to know.
And the Paramount logo is still there, the original logo with the lights, you know, the light bulbs are above the Hard Rock.
Well, anyway, that's where the main offices were, of course, where all the studios had all their main offices in New York, pretty much almost to this day. To this day. And there were all kinds of movements to move all of that west to Los Angeles, but it never happened.
Okay, now we'll jump through the next decade very quickly here. I know you guys have been very patient with us here. But this is Adolf Zucker on the cover of Time in 1929. Now he's pretty much reached the pinnacle of Hollywood power. It's really an amazing story. I mean, this guy, this is almost, maybe 30 years after he stepped onto American shores. And now he's the king of Hollywood, okay? But there's changes afoot within the next few years. Well, within the same year, we're going to have the stock market crash. Paramount is going to be affected deeply, just like all of Hollywood, to the point of the company ends up in bankruptcy. His partner, Jesse Lasky, gets forced out of the company. He actually gets forced out of the presidency. He's kicked upstairs to the chairman of the board, which he keeps in one way or another till he dies in 1976. What was he, 103?
Yeah.
103. But anyway, we'll skip through this. I want to show you very quickly. Now, basically, with the coming of talkies, you have a whole different type of actor. Now you have to have people who can speak. And like Mark was saying, a lot of careers ended overnight. We'll just skip through and we'll show you some of the stars of the 30s here. I love this picture.
I do too.
This is from the Spoilers. Now we wanted this to be the cover of the book. The problem we had is the way the book works is they start on the back and bring it over to the front. So this would have been on the back cover. You know, we couldn't have Paramount Pictures on the back page. So it's a shame. We talked about even flipping it, but then Paramount Pictures would have been backwards.
Yeah, but then I told them, let's use the Sunset
So let's use
Boulevard
Sunset Boulevard. But this is a great photo. RKO now, Mark has kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yep.
Throughout its history, Paramount for most of its history, Paramount and RKO shared the same block. There was a wall between them. But I love this picture. There's a great story about Marilyn Monroe, as little Norma Jean Baker, was growing up in an orphanage at the time. She could see basically this door from her orphanage. And she had a dream of one day making it as a star and working at RKO, where her mother worked for a while, as a matter of fact. And later on, she did star in a movie here, so it was, it was one of those cool.
Yeah, there's this famous shot of her actually walking to the old administration building in the film. I've just found it, showing Norma Jean there.
Oh,
walking
I'd
there,
love to see that.
where the arches are.
Is that right? Okay, the early talkies. Now, this is very interesting. Now, with talkies, everything changed, including the method of filming. And you see these big, huge, basically bunkers they had to put the cameras and things in.
Booths.
Yeah, they were booths, but they had to be soundproof because the cameras made so much noise. One thing I love about this is Neil Hamilton, who was, later on, you might remember him as Commissioner Gordon in the Batman from Adam West. Now, I just had to run outside real quick. I ran right across his star right over here. I didn't even realize he was there, but that's pretty nice. Here's some new stars. We got Mae West.
Oh, yeah,
and
let me
W.C.
explain this
Fields.
shot. I finally found out what this shot is. Couldn't figure it out. On the left is Emmanuel Cohen, the guy sitting there that looks sick.
Yeah.
Right? He later, during the Depression, when Adolf Zukor was kicked upstairs, he was made president of production. Jesse Lasky was gone. People hated him because, for the obvious reasons. But he's the one that brought Mae West in. And he was Mae West's manager and everything, and he brought her in. And this is a party, an anniversary party for Mae West and their relationship. It was like, I forgot how many years it was, with Emmanuel Cohen. So who was there? Gary Cooper, W.C. Fields, Bresson, what's his first name? Carl Bresson, thank you, and the director Wesley Ruggles. So this was the anniversary party. It was at the Ambassador Hotel. And she came all dressed up and everything, and they had this party, and I didn't know this until only, I think, last year, when I actually found an article and was showing them there, explaining the whole thing.
Interesting. Here's some great...
I love this shot.
I love this one. This is... I want to just point out one thing. There's, if you can see this in the book, there's a lot of the Paramount stars, but...
You better point them out.
Yeah, we'll point out a couple of them, but I want to point out this woman right here. She's next to W.C. Fields and a few others, but...
Right there?
That's Mary Carlisle.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you were at the Republic celebration at the barn, what was that, 6 months ago or so?
Yeah.
She's still alive. She's amazing.
Yeah, she was there. That's right.
That's amazing.
Now, in the shot is Emmanuel Cohen, Maurice Chevalier, Joseph von Sternberg, Charles Lawton, Cary Grant, just incredible people there with their directors and everybody standing there. It's such a candid, great shot.
All right, I love this. The Marx Brothers, Will Rogers for president, the four Marx Brothers for vice president.
Now, the Marx Brothers actually did one of the first sound films, Coconuts, at the Astoria studio. And they have the distinction of being the first film in sound to be made there. And of course, they were good friends with Jesse Lasky and everybody else. But it wasn't until later years they moved to MGM. But this is their early years, their developmental years was with Paramount.
I love this. Hopalong Cassidy, I'm a big Western fan. You see him there in the middle.
Explain that whole Hopalong Cassidy.
Well, this is a really amazing thing. Hopalong Cassidy was one of these big silent stars that fell by the wayside. Actually, he didn't fall by the wayside because of his voice or anything, which happened to most...
William Boyd.
I'm sorry, William Boyd. I said Hopalong. William Boyd, his career, he didn't lose it because of his voice. What happened was there was a case of mistaken identity. Right. There was another actor named William Boyd who got involved with some scandal. It was like a DUI or something.
I don't know, something bad.
Something bad, and the public thought it was him. And that's how he lost his career.
But get this, you're going to love this.
Yeah.
Guess who discovered William Boyd? Are you ready? Cecil B. DeMille. And he worked for Cecil B. DeMille's own production company when DeMille left Paramount. He worked on several of his films. The Volga Boatman was one of the first. But he worked on a whole bunch of them. and they stayed close friends. And in 1956, in Egypt, when he was shooting Ten Commandments, DeMille was with the cameraman and all this stuff, and a familiar voice called out to him some derogatory term like, hey, bald guy or something, turn around. And DeMille was like pissed off. Who's calling me a bald guy? And it's William Boyd came to see him unannounced. And they hugged and they had this whole big reunion. I found a picture of that reunion.
We'll skip on past this.
Isn't that
This is,
amazing how they stayed friends all these years?
this is NRA. This is not the National Rifle
And,
Association.
and that's, of course,
This is
Mae
Mae
West.
West. Mae West there in the front, but this is the National Recovery Act, right, during the
Yeah,
Depression.
yeah, right.
Yeah. I love this because this is, you got Cary, let's see.
Cary Grant.
You got Cary Grant, you got Randolph Scott in the middle, and you've got John Lodge over here.
John Lodge, that's the one.
Now, I love this story because John Lodge, and Mae West actually wanted John Lodge to be her leading man in the film that later went to Cary Grant and made him a star. But the cool thing about John Lodge, I just find this picture very fascinating, is he didn't really care because his main love was politics. He was the grandson of Cabot Lodge, from Massachusetts.
Right.
He was the brother of Richard Nixon's running mate in this 1960 election. He actually became the governor of Connecticut and also an ambassador to a bunch of countries. I just find that very
I
fascinating.
forgot all about that part of it.
Here we go. This is Climbing Around in Production Park. You got Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, of course. Going back to the Barn Gymnasium.
The barn became a gymnasium, a meeting hall, a place where they did reunions, etc., for years and years. And we have a whole bunch of famous stars that worked out there.
I think I got a couple pictures of them here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is not
Good.
a famous star, but I love this picture.
Forgot her name.
This is a B movie star called, I think her name was Gwen Kenyon. I think
Something
it
like
was.
that.
Okay, you can see this is a publicity shot because check out her shoes. Okay?
Yeah,
You're not going to be doing, swinging on a bar with those kind of
Yeah,
shoes.
that's true.
Joe DiMaggio, Donald O'Connor. Now this is kind of funny. This is the Squaw Man reunion. Now this is supposed to be the 20th reunion of it, but they were a year late. I don't exactly know what the story is
I
there,
don't know either, but point out Oscar
yeah, this is Oscar Apfel.
on the left.
Oh, I'm sorry, Oscar Apfel there.
Yep.
This is the cameraman, and I just went blank on his
Forgot
name.
his
I got it
name.
in the
I
notes
forgot.
there. But these were the guys who made the Squaw Man and the surviving folks there. I think we got another picture of them. No, we don't. But this was there at the barn. And so it kind of come in full circle. This is 20 years later at the same place.
Let me
where they
explain
found
about
it.
Oscar Apfel. When DeMille was sent west, remember they were rushing to go west and do all this filming. DeMille didn't know how to shoot a film at all, period. They were relying on someone they hired named Oscar Apfel, who was already an experienced director. He was an actor before and then became a director. He worked for Edison and Reliance and different companies prior to 1913. So they hired him to help. DeMille became like a producer on site. And then DeMille would watch Oscar direct and learn, and Oscar taught him how to direct. By the time The Virginian, which was the second film, DeMille directed his first film, and thanks to Oscar. And the funny thing is I have pictures of them in 1913 together. They look like brothers. So I forgot to mention William DeMille. William, as we mentioned earlier, was a playwright. And he was not a director at first. He was a playwright. And very famous and very successful one. So when DeMille started to do his thing in California, and everything started to be, going well, he invited William, you must come west. There's a telegram. You must come west. You must make films. I want to help you and do all this. And he refused. I don't want to go west. It's dirty out there, and I just don't want to do this. Film business. Stage man. Well, he convinced him. He came out to California. He went to the Alexandria Hotel first, and then he asked them, how do I get to Hollywood? This is in 1915 he came out. And so they said, you take this trolley, you go, take a taxi, it's easier. It took him almost an hour to get to Hollywood from downtown. And he went to the Hollywood Hotel where he checked in at Highland and Hollywood Boulevard. He checked in, washed up, and he walked out dressed nicely and clean and everything. It's all dirt roads, can you imagine? And he asked the man, where is the Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company? And the guy said, what? What is that? He says, you mean you haven't heard of them? They've been here already a year and a half. No, we never heard of them. Then some guy overheard in the lobby, oh, that's that film company down on Vine Street. And he says, is it walking distance to get there? And he says, well, yeah, I suppose. It's quite a distance, you know, to get down there. And he walked down there in his nice clothes and everything. By the time he got there, he was full of dust, completely dirty, and found his brother. And he says, why didn't you tell me the hotel was like 2 miles away or whatever? And he still didn't want to make the films. But then he said, come with me. And they got in their car and they drove to the Lasky Ranch where they were shooting Rosa the Rancho, I think, at the time. And then he convinced him to have his own production company. He introduced him to everybody, and William stayed for a while and made films. He went back and forth to New York, and William then became quite a good director in the silent film era. And by the way, it was William DeMille that started the USC Film School, by the way. And get this, in Pordenone, which is a silent film festival in Italy, I've been connected to for many years, I produced there a DeMille festival. Everything was DeMille. And we showed William's films and Cecil's films. And then we had a contest. These are all archivists and historians from around the world. Who is the better director? And guess who was voted the best director? William DeMille. And you know why? Because William's films were modern. The acting was modern. The way he made them was modern. And Cecil was still connected to the Victorian stage. Everybody was still doing these movements, and he chose films like, you know, Joan the Woman and Joan of Arc, emoting, but Williams' films were about real people and real He did a whole film about a lost dog. That this guy loved this dog, and the dog was then found by this rich people, and the rich people loved the dog, and then the poor guy loved the dog, and they made it's the most beautiful, heartwarming film you ever saw. Everybody was crying there and everything. And Victor Schertzinger, not Schertzinger, I forgot who played the starring role. I forgot his name. But it was one of the best films I ever saw from the silent era. Modern film. So there you go. There's the two brothers, and that's why William went back to New York. And no, he moved out here and became a teacher at USC.
Oh.
Okay.
And he's buried right next to his
Yes.
brother now in Hollywood Forever. Marlena Dietrich, I love.
That's her limo.
I love that car. Isn't that amazing? Marco Polo. Now this was at the what's now the Paramount Ranch over there by Agora Hills. They bought this. I forget what year they bought it, but this was
1926.
26. This was about a 2,100 acre piece of ground they have there. But I want to show you this because we'll do this kind of quickly. But check this out. This is Marco Polo, and I believe the next slide is
Which is a Goldwyn film, by the way.
Yeah. The next one I believe is Beau Geste.
Should be.
But check this out, the sets. Now this is the Far East, okay, for Marco Polo. Check out Beau Geste. That's North Africa. Now take a look once again at these sets.
See that entryway? It's the same
It's
thing.
the same. They're using the same sets.
Yeah.
I think that's just amazing.
So when I give my tours at Paramount Ranch, by the way, it's for those of you who don't know, Silent Society, which is an arm of Hollywood Heritage, we have 2 programs every summer, July and August. We show silent films at Paramount Ranch in the old pavilions where they used to store the stagecoaches and all the rolling stock. I give a tour of the ranch and show where the sets were and all this stuff, and we have wonderful films with live musical accompaniment. So you must check out the website, hollywoodheritage.org, and it'll explain when the next shows are in August and July and August. So don't miss that. You take your picnic dinner there, and it's just wonderful.
Let's go to the next one here. This is in front of the administration building. I think at this time it's named
Paramount Pictures,
Look
Inc.
at that.
But it's
There we go.
ink there.
There we are. So this is interesting because check out Marathon Street here. It's still a street. It wasn't until, what, the 80s that Paramount finally
During
bought
the
all
1980s,
the land.
with the Viacom company, they decided to just change the whole lot, like Jesse and Adolf Zucker were doing with those plans. They decided to change the whole lot. They bought all the frontage back on Melrose Avenue. They closed off Marathon Street, made it a walking mall, and for little carts and things. And then they beautified the lot. I had the privilege of working with the planning people at the time with my historical pictures. They could see what the lot used to look like. So, for example, behind the administration building, right there, was an ugly parking lot that you will see time and time again in the television show, the
Can't help you here.
Impossible, Mission Impossible. Thank you. Mission Impossible series. Have you seen the Mission Impossible series? I don't mean the one with you know what's his name, but the TV show. But there was an ugly parking lot there, and they used that. So it used to be a park where you saw Clara Bow by the fountain. So I showed them these pictures, and they said, "Oh my gosh, there was a park there." Park's there. Then I showed them Lucy Park, which is the RKO side. There was partially parking lot as well. They put that park back. The water towers, there were 2 of them. We didn't need 2. They took one down, and they left the RKO one. It said RKO Studios on it. So they showed them the pictures, and they repainted it Paramount Pictures as it is today. So in other words, it's the most beautiful studio, and they got an award from the LA Conservancy and the City of Los Angeles for creating a park-like atmosphere at Paramount.
All right, back then, there were a lot of, you see these people walking back. They were probably going to restaurants that used to be there, restaurants and bars.
Across the street was a restaurant called Oblat's. Used to eat there. Yeah, I know. Nicotell's was down the block, right? And Lucy's across the street. And so they had all these wonderful restaurants right next to the lot. Yes, they had their own commissary, but you know, you go to other places too. And so that's how it is, like it is today. The people from Paramount come over to Raleigh Studios. We have a great cafe, a great chef. So they go back and forth, and everybody uses each other's places. And Lucy's is still there.
I love this because, I mean, this is a beautiful
There's
photo.
the lit sign I was telling you
The lit
about.
sign, and this is basically where our book ends. This is the end of the 30s, and I love this because it almost kind of foretells what's coming in the 40s. We all know what happened in the world, and so there were a lot of changes coming, and those changes will be the subject of our next book, which will be about the 40s,
book
50s,
2.
60s, 70s. So, but anyway, folks, thank you very much for your patience. Hope you had a nice time. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Questions now? Questions?
Oh, I wanted to kick it over to Michael for one issue, too, one item.
We just wanted to thank everybody for coming in. We have the book here. If anybody's interested in purchasing it, we'll sign it for you. Has all the information that we just went over, plus a lot more stuff in there. Makes a great Christmas or Hanukkah gift, which is coming up soon. So, and if you're interested in Paramount, they do 2 great tours over there. They do a regular tour, which is a 2-hour tour, and they also initiated a VIP tour, which is a 5.5-hour tour. You get lunch, and they take you into the archives department. You get to see the costumes. You get to see a lot of the old jewelry and stuff, and they take you to a lot of places, the signage shop and things like that you won't get to normally see on the 2-hour tour. And it's a fantastic tour. You're in a park, you're walking, you get to see all of this stuff, and we try to support them. They're being real good to us with the book, and they're selling a lot of books for us over there, and the people there have been really great with us. So I just wanted to mention the tour, and they do that, I believe, 6 days a week now. They're operating also on Saturdays now with the tour, so people that couldn't normally get there during the weekdays if you were working or whatnot, it is available now on weekends. So if there's any questions, this gentleman has a question here. Go ahead.
Michael, could you talk about the physical separation between RKO and Paramount? Were they the walls of sound stages, or
He's
were they built
busting at the seams to answer this
No,
question.
it's all right. No, basically, yeah, there were buildings that created that wall, but there was a fence, and it went right across. And but there were gates, and each studio used each other's. First of all, RKO had their RKO Ranch in Encina, so they used, you know, they had set. But sometimes they needed their New York Street is just right behind them, so they rented that, and they just would go right through the gate, and there they were. And I actually found some reference in some of the trades to that effect. They were using it.
The ceremony when they...
Oh yes, of course. When RKO became Desilu, it was the Desilu lot until 1957. I mean 57 to 67, excuse me. And in 1967, Lucy sold the studio to Gulf and Western, to Paramount. And interestingly enough, they had to knock a few buildings down to get so trucks could go through. One of the most important buildings that was going to be knocked down was the special effects department, where King Kong was born. And a friend of mine was there in 1967, and he saw it in the 50s when he worked for DeMille, and he went in there and he found one of the largest 23-inch skeleton of King Kong,
Oh, man.
which we sold in London a few years ago. And it's now in the hands of Peter Jackson, who is the biggest collector of King Kong. Obvious reasons. He made King Kong too.
If you do happen to find yourself at the studio, check out the manhole covers, because some of them
Yes.
still say Brunton on it, which was the original owners of the studio.
Oh,
you
yeah,
see
yeah,
the
yeah, I
metal,
forgot.
they'll
That's
say
right.
Edward Brunton on
Your
the
question.
metal.
When DeMille was sold, that's right, because EJ brought it up. Blue Dorn, who was the head of Gulf and Western, Charles Blue Dorn, and Lucille Ball cut the film ribbon. It was like they had a piece of film. They cut it, with the scissors, and the two lots were merged.
Oh.
There's a great shot I have of that.
And Mark,
That's in the book, isn't it?
No,
No, that's not
it's
in the
not in
book.
the book, 'cause
I
we
keep forgetting
ended
it's up to
the-
1930. Yeah, go on.
Mark, you were talking about how Cecil B. DeMille was broke when he came out here. How long did Cecil B. DeMille and these other people use the Alexandria Hotel as their long
Very
living-
short time.
Oh, short time.
Only a few days because they couldn't afford it. It was a 5-star hotel.
I see.
They came right out and lived in the Hollywood Hotel, which that was expensive. So then they finally got a little bungalow houses which they lived in, they rented. And they rode horses around there too, as a matter of fact. But then they stopped riding the horses.
So the Alexandria Hotel was a 5-star hotel.
It was super. Oh yeah, that's right. There's a famous carpet there. It's called the $1 Million Carpet. You might have read about it, some of you. And what does that mean? It was a giant oriental carpet in the big lobby. I have pictures of this in its heyday. Marble columns, incredible place. So why is it called the $1 Million Carpet? Because many film deals were made there from 1913 all the way up until the 30s. People would come to the Alexandria, film people from all around the world, make a deal on the carpet, and then go to lunch.
And finally, your publisher has such a severe page restriction. What did you leave out from this book that really upset you?
Like
Oh.
everything.
Well,
Do
I
you
mean,
want to take?
Yeah.
Yeah, we left out the years 1940 to 1970.
but that's the second book, so that's okay. I think
it's a
the
formula
thing.
book.
I mean, we don't want to oversell it. I mean, the problem you have with these books is there's so much you can tell, but we're basically doing captions for photos, right? So we try to get as much meat in there with as few as possible words, but we're leaving. I mean, there's things that. I mean, I learned things from Mark tonight. I didn't know about that poster of Squaw Man. I just learned that tonight. But if I would have known that, I would have put that in there.
No way could we do that.
But we couldn't. But we just can't fit everything in there.
It's 128 pages.
128 pages.
And 130 pictures, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that's why my Hollywood book is 2 volumes. My Beverly Hills books are 2 volumes. But then they made me squeeze San Fernando Valley into 1 volume. That was terrible. That's a 10-volume book. Can you imagine what I had to cut out of it? I mean, what they cut, what we all have to cut? It is painful. But we have to keep in the basic story, the basic important facts. That's what's in the book. So you have it boiled down, pretty much, of what the company or the town or whatever it is. But San Fernando Valley had 35 cities in it. I had to boil into this tiny book. Gosh, the pictures I edited out, I mean, telling you such great things. But no, we're going to do book 2, and that'll add to it.
So it sounds like the sale of this book with the 3,000 copies that Brad Gray bought at Paramount.
He didn't buy them.
They were
He
going
wanted to buy them, but what happened? There was a Paramount had a budget constriction, and Arcadia couldn't meet that budget restriction. And then when I was going to intercede to try to have the deal done, Paramount dropped their budget again, and at that point, I couldn't go to
What
them
he
and ask
means
them
is they didn't want to pay for the books.
Yeah.
That's what he means.
It was getting to the point where, like, I was going to have to go to Arcadia and say, just give them a book for free.
You see, this is the thing. I mean, Bison Archives has been around a long time, and I've tried to get many book deals through, and it's very hard to do. So when Arcadia, I was supplying pictures for other Arcadia books. And finally they came to me and said, what about your stuff? Why don't you do some books? And I thought, yeah. So what do you want to do? And I said, Hollywood first. So I got Robert Noodleman from Hollywood Heritage. Now we did our first book together. And then I've done 15 books now for them. And 2 independent books with George Jezik, Hollywood Past and Present, Los Angeles Past and Present. But the problem is, I'm still trying to get a big book done, you know, with all the pictures. But then Dino Williams did The Hollywood Story, which has a lot of my stuff is in there. It's a wonderful book. Have you seen The Hollywood Story book? It's a big coffee table book, which Jeff has
Who's the
here.
publisher for that?
Who's the publisher for that?
That's self-published.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. You have to get it. It has the greatest pictures in it. But that's what my dream is to do a big book and put in like 500 pictures and all the text that we were talking about. But to do that, it's very expensive. I just finished working on a self-published book a friend of mine did on the Beverly Hills Hotel. It cost him $275,000 to do that book.
Wow.
$100 book. It's a $100 book.
Wow.
But just think about it. The writer cost him $40,000, the pictures $15,000, the editing $12,000, 60-something thousand just for that. Then that's not including the printing and the paper and the shipping, you know, from China, wherever they do it,
Or Italy.
and then or Italy, and all the copies, you know, thousands of copies. That's why it costs so much.
So in 2 years, you will have the second half of the Paramount
Next
story.
year,
Next year.
I hope.
We're hoping.
Well,
You know
since
why? Because next year's 2014.
2014.
Anniversary.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's the anniversary in my historical archives. It's the 100-year anniversary of Warner Brothers, 1912. Of course, they don't look at it that way. It's the 100-year anniversary of Universal, 1912. They don't look at it that way. I'll explain in a minute. We have, of course, the Paramount, 1912, the famous players. Then we have a Technicolor company. It was 1912, 100-year anniversary. And then it's the 100-year anniversary of some of the historical companies that don't exist, like Lubin and Kinemacolor and not Kinema, they were 1911. Anyway, there's a bunch of other historical companies started in 1912.
So what did the three of you learn working together on this book that's going to make it easier to put Paramount Part 2 together?
I gave them everything.
Don't get into
Yeah.
business with Adolf Zucker.
No, I gave them all the information. They have all the. You have all the pictures,
You know,
right?
I got to tell you that this.
Well, I mean, not the
But
latest
we're
stuff.
going to need other stuff.
I'm
Yeah, I know,
not.
we have to, I know. But
I'm
still.
not just saying this because
Yeah.
Mark's here, but every time I'm with Mark, I learn something new. I learned a couple things tonight, and every time, because there's still, I mean, it's a very complicated history, as we were saying. I mean, once again, I go back to our. We said this before we came. When
We did the Warner.
we
book
did the Warner
together.
Brothers book, and that's much simpler because you have the Warner Brothers.
But still, that's a 2-volume book too.
But still, that
yeah.
but I mean, still, yeah, just like every good Hollywood story, it's going to have twists and turns. But that's still kind of, you know, you kind of can put a ribbon around that. Paramount still confuses me, you know. Still to this day, I mean, it's like
It's
I go, wait a
true.
minute, now wait, when did he go over here, you know? And so every time I talk to Mark, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, he was over at Clune at that moment. That's right, yeah, okay. So
It is very complicated.
so I think in the next book, just simply from the time that we all spend with Mark, it becomes a little clearer. So I think when it comes to the next book,
Yeah,
it'll
but
be,
doing that list I told you about of the corporate name changes, wow.
yeah,
The other
Yes.
studios were basically run like family businesses. Warner Brothers bought it. They owned it until the 60s, and that was it. You know, they were always in charge, and a lot of the other studios were like that. Paramount was a conglomerate. It was a business. You know, Zucker ran it that way. He wasn't putting himself forward. He didn't have a big ego. What he wanted was control. He was a businessman. He wanted to control the business. He knew how to make money, and that's what he was going to do. And if you didn't adhere by his rules, then he thought about it and he got you out. One way or another, he would sneak around you and he'd get you out and he'd put somebody else in your place, so he was going to make money. And that's why he's not as known. He's not like David Selznick. He's not like Jack Warner. He's not like Carl Lamel. All these other guys that own these Studios or Sam Goldwyn that put themselves out there. Zucker was just a businessman, and he put himself in. Like, sounds like, 1935, he wasn't in the day-to-day operations anymore. But what we have to realize is he was from 1912. The way he put it was, for 30 years, I was in the day-to-day operations, and I was done with that. So he became the chairman of the board, and nobody ousted him until he died. He was 103, and he still had his hand in the company, you know. I mean, there's pictures of him and Robert Evans. Robert Evans was on his hands and knees shaking his hand when he took over. You know, nobody wanted to make Adolf Zucker mad.
Zucker lived on the East Coast most of his whole career.
Mark,
Yeah.
say some very nice words in the foreword about A.C. Lyles, who recently passed. Can you talk and clarify, what did A.C. really do?
Well, A.C. Lyles, by the way, this big article in Classic Images today, I just got it. That's a memorial, and you guys are doing, Zucker for Classic Images, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be a 6-page article with about 15 to 20 of Mark's photographs.
I gave him 30, by the way.
Oh, good. He loved it. He emailed me and said,
Including the cover of Zucker
but
on
you
the
did it too
time.
soon, because he goes, I got the pictures. He said, now where's the article? So I said,
Oh,
can we get it Monday? And he just came at me with a machete. We started Monday. You told me Friday.
But
So,
anyway,
but we're going to do a
A.C. Lyles.
6-page story in Classic Images. It's going to be in the next issue, and it's going to be on Adolf Zucker, and of course Paramount will be prominent in that article. So,
Now, many of you might not have heard who he was. I mean, how many people of you know who A.C. Lyles was,
These are the
right?
first people
Yeah.
you meet when you come here.
Yeah, so some of the people don't know. So A.C. Lyles was until just recently, like, how long ago? It's like a month ago?
about a month ago he passed.
A month ago he passed away, 96 years old. And he was the kind of the publicity representative for Paramount to the public, like the public relations face to everyone. He started in the business as a child in New York, working in the theater. He wasn't even old enough to be an usher. He was like one of those little kids that ran around and cleaned up things, whatever. But he just was fascinated with films, and Adolf Zucker, of course, everyone spoke about Adolf Zucker there, and that was in the Paramount Theater. So the offices are there. So as time went on, he finally met Zucker, and to make a long story short, when he was before he was out of school, he went to Zucker and he said, I want to work at the Paramount studio in Los Angeles. And, well, kid, you better finish school first, and then maybe I'll get you a job. Well, he finishes school. Instead of asking Zucker, like, I'm ready now, he just goes west. He comes to Los Angeles, comes to the studio gate, as he says, and he says, I'm here to work for Adolf Zucker. Who are you? Well, my name is A.C. Lyles. I'm here for Zucker. Well, Zucker's not here. He lives in New York. So I'm telling you, he just shows up. But because he was this young kid and he was so enthusiastic, and he did indeed work for Paramount in New York, they let him in the studio, and he started to work his way up as an office boy, mailroom, and whatever. And eventually, he became an assistant to Pine Thomas Productions. Pine Thomas, in the 1930s, made the Paramount Westerns. They were the ones that made all these great Westerns, that production company. He worked for them, and he learned how to make a film, particularly a Western. He met everybody, and finally by the 1940s, right around this time, I think it was the 40s, they actually gave him a chance to produce his own films for Paramount. And that went into the 50s. He produced a whole slew of 50s Westerns, which were really successful. One was Waco. I remember Waco. I have a great shot of the Paramount Western Street, and they're shooting it out during Waco. And then over the years, he produced other films, and he met everybody, knew everybody, and eventually didn't retire until the 1980s.
Well, I know he was doing those B westerns up as late until the mid-1960s.
Yes.
But I was wondering, what did he physically produce after that? He got
Oh, no, there were other
the TV
films.
show Deadwood, that was, I believe...
No,
on
that's recent. No.
That was the last thing.
Look at his credits. He did many other films and TV shows.
He did.
He was doing TV shows as well, if you look at his credits.
Okay.
No, he wasn't taking a sabbatical or sleeping in his office. He was working all the way up to when he retired. But when he retired, Paramount said, don't leave, we want you to be supervisor of our different productions, because he had a lot of knowledge, he knew of everybody. And he did this right up until Deadwood. Now we can say Deadwood. Up at Deadwood, you know, the TV show Deadwood, he was brought on as, I don't know what he did there, but he came there and he kind of stood around in his suit, just like when William DeMille came, you know, to La Hollywood, to all the dirt. He comes there in his suit to the Melody Ranch, you know, in Newhall where they were shooting this. And people would always know, oh, AC's on the set, you know, beautifully dressed with a tie and a white shirt.
I was out there for a press event at the end of it, and sure enough, the town car pulls up, and AC.
There he is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that answers your question.
He was very good at bringing things in under budget and on time.
Yes.
And that was, and I don't know if anybody would ever notice, but he's probably the only person that was associated with one company for like 75 years. He worked for the same place.
1932 to now,
So now, how many
2013.
years is that?
Mark, how much of his personal collection are you going to have access to?
Oh, no.
I
This
don't.
gentleman in
I've
the
been
back
to his
has a
personal
question.
collection, and actually, I found pictures he never saw. So I actually have some good stuff, but you know, I don't know what's going to happen to his stuff. I know it's going to be protected somewhere. I don't know yet. But they're having his memorial soon at Paramount on the Monday. the
Monday
11th.
is it?
Yeah, Monday at
Are
2
you
o'clock.
going?
I can't go. But I was at his birthday party just this year at Musso and Frank, and Tom LaBonge and I hosted the party, and we introduced, Mickey Rooney was there, longtime friend of his. So in other words, just to end, who is A.C. Lyles? Yes, he was a producer, but he kind of represented Paramount throughout the last 40 years as their ambassador. Everybody knew him in the United States. He was close friends with Ronald Reagan. He represented the Hollywood film industry in Washington. I mean, this is his legacy. He's remembered for being Mr. Hollywood, not just Johnny Grant. Yes.
He was basically known as the man that had the longest career in the city of studios.
Yeah, that's what he said, the longest
87
career.
years.
Yeah. Okay, everybody.
Is Desi Lou Culver going to be well represented in the next book?
Who?
The facility, Desi Lou Culver.
Oh! This is getting complicated, but basically when Paramount took over the Desilu assets, the Desilu Culver Studios became Paramount Culver for a short time. Then it became Culver City Studio, blah, blah, blah. That's where Going with the Wind was shot. That was Thomas Ince's studio, DeMille studio. I mean, it's all incestuous. It is a complicated history. That's why it's taken me all these years to write this encyclopedia on studios. It keeps getting bigger and bigger as I go. And nowadays, it still is complicated. Because even these studios, NBC Universal now. So there's a whole new corporate connection to Universal. And Paramount with CBS. It's really complicated.
There were so many wonderful TV series at Desi Lou Culver, like the Andy Griffith Show.
Well, why do you think
Show.
Paramount had Star Trek? It was a Desilu property, you know, the ownership of the copyright. So they owned it. So they just made Star Treks. But the first Star Trek was made in Culver City, and, you know, the first show, first series, and that was a Desilu show. And I was there on that set because I was lucky. Because my friends, my two boyfriends, their father was Alexander Courage, who wrote the music for Star Trek. So we got to go visit the set and meet everyone. Pretty good? I still am friends with Leonard Nimoy to this day, all these years.
Did you want your book signed? Stuck right up.
Any more questions? Oh yeah, we're going to sign some books if you want a book.
How you doing, man? Good to see you.
You can get up now.
Support Paramount Pictures. We got some great stuff coming out. Wolves of Wall Street, later today.
I'm telling you that since the
No, when I first see it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.